Welcome to the meeting of the Board of Behavioral Sciences. The time is 8:34 a.m. We are located at the Hilton Los Angeles on the 4th floor, Salon A and B. It is Friday, May 11th, 2018. May we establish a quorum, please?
Good morning. Renee Launer.
Here.
Dr. Christine Whitlisbach.
Here.
Dr. Peter Chu.
Here.
Betty Conley.
Here.
Deborah Brown.
Here.
Christina Wong.
Here.
Dr. Leah Brew.
Here.
Jonathan Maddox.
Here.
Max Disposti.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Starting with Renee, would you please introduce the board? Would the board please introduce themselves?
More coffee.
No.
Renee Launer, LCSW member.
Christine Whitlisbach, public member.
Peter Chu, public member.
Betty Conley, LEP member.
Deborah Brown, public member.
Christina Wong, LCSW member.
Leah Brew, LPCC member.
Jonathan Maddox, MFT member.
Max Disposti, public member.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next item, we have the consent calendar, board meeting minutes from February 21st through the 22nd and April 12th April 12th, 2018. Is there any member of the board that would like to pull any of the items off of these minutes for discussion? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Vote, please.
Renee Launer. Yes. Dr. Christine Whitlisbach.
Yes.
Dr. Peter Chu.
Aye.
Betty Conley.
Yes.
Deborah Brown.
Aye.
Christina Wong.
Yes.
Dr. Leah Brew.
Yes.
Jonathan Maddox.
Yes.
Max Disposti.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on, we have the board chair report, and we have a couple of,
We have February 20, oh, you approved the consent calendar as a whole?
yeah,
Okay. Never know.
no one had anything removed.
Gotcha.
Okay, moving on to the board chair report, we have a few things we'd like to mention. First of all, congratulations to Christina Wong for being reappointed and Senate confirmed. Congratulations for another 3 years. Yeah. In addition to that, I would like, as I mentioned at the Public and Advocacy Committee meeting, I would like to establish a telehealth committee. And in this committee, due to staff restraints, because we can't have staff working on 3 or 4 subcommittees at the same time, would begin after the exempt committee's commencement, which we are understanding that probably will be wrapped up by the end of 2018. So the telehealth committee would then start at the beginning of 2019. And the composition of that committee will be left up to the new president or chairman, the new chairperson, whoever is elected today will be able to make up that composition. Okay, is there any further? Yes.
So I also like to make an announcement that Deborah Brown, our chair, also get the Senate confirmation, to serve on the board for the next 3 years. So don't forget yourself.
Thank you. The other thing I'd like to mention is that in an effort, it's been mentioned many, many times, in an effort to do outreach, we like our board members as well as our executive officer and assistant executive officer to go out in the public to inform them of all the things that we're doing, any kind of updated legislation, requirements such as like supervision committee, ethics exam, ethics and law exam. So Ms. Madsen was kind enough, I think above and beyond, to drive all the way down to California State University, Fresno, and spoke at a counseling class, spoke in a counseling class, and often for about 2 hours. And often the students' eyes got very large. They were very surprised to learn of many different things. And this was a beginning class, so they're just getting into the field, but there are a lot of words of wisdom that Ms. Madsen was able to pass on so that they clearly understand what the standards are, the integrity, and who the board is. And when they become licensed, because that's sometimes this invisible group of people, and what our charges are. And so she very clearly and eloquently, I think, laid out what our charge is and how they go through the licensing practice, pending legislation, and how it might impact them. So they're on the cutting edge now, this one little class, on the cutting edge of what is going on. But one little class, and with social media, talks to another class who talks to another group of people who talks to another group of people. We were also very fortunate. Fresno State has a nonprofit counseling and rehabilitation program. Their clients are predominantly Medicaid and Medicare, so they reach out to the most vulnerable people in the San Joaquin Valley. Their state-of-the-art counseling program is amazing, and we were able to tour that and meet with Dr. Lucy, who's the program manager, and probably were there for a couple of hours. But I think we were quite impressed with the amount of supervision that's given to those associates and how they handle their supervision with integrity and ethics. And so shout out to the program at Fresno State. Very good program. And I think in the future, that's what Ms. Mattson would like to do. She goes and speaks to all the organizations, but in addition to that, the universities that have, and nonprofits, she's always open to go and speak to them and answer any questions they might have. So thank you for driving all the way down to Fresno and then turning around, spending half the day there, and then turning around and driving all the way back home to Sacramento. So thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. In addition to that, no more additions. Are there any other board activities by any other members of the board? Yes.
So Renee Launer just published an article in her area of expertise, and I'll let her explain it because I will not do it justice, where it was published and what it's about.
Author Launer.
Thank you. It was published in Family Therapy Magazine because child custody evaluators and clinicians who work with families are probably at the biggest risk. And the title is, let's see, Jan Lee has my hard copy.
When a client threatens the therapist's guidelines for mitigating risk.
Thank you. When a client, yes, so it was just published 3 days ago. It's online. It's not yet in hard copy. So I have a co-author who's an attorney who works only in the area of mental health law. So we were absolutely thrilled. It's not an area that's often addressed. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Congratulations. Any other board members have something they'd like to share? Okay.
I'm going to give a shout out to Dr. Brew for her presentation at the CalPIC conference. She was talking about supervision and how to do it correctly, and those in attendance, it was very well received. And I know CalPIC is near and dear to your heart, but the service you gave and the information you provided all the attendees was really, really valuable, so thank you.
Any others? Okay. Well, moving on to recognition of departing board members. And I would like to turn this over to Christine Whittlesbach. Yes. It is right here. We would like to thank Renee Launer. Would you please rise? This is Renee Launer's last day on the Board of Behavioral Sciences after 11 years of service. And I thought it fitting that Dr. Whittlesbach give the proclamation. They have both served on this board almost the same amount of time. And so I turn that over to you.
Okay, so we're having trouble with the mic. Am I loud enough for everyone to hear me? I'm going to be reading the proclamation. I'm so honored to do this for Renee. So, whereas Renee Lahner faithfully served as a member of the California State Board of Behavioral Sciences from January 17th, 2007 to June 30th, 2018, it's a very long time, and whereas Mrs. Lahner faithfully served as board chair from June 2009 to May 2011, and whereas Mrs. Lahner provided invaluable leadership as chair of the Policy and Advocacy Committee and as chair of the LCSW Education Committee, and whereas Mrs. Lahner served as a member of the License Portability Committee and the Compliance and Enforcement Committee, and whereas throughout her years of service she gave faithfully of herself and her ideas and acted forthrightly and conscientiously, always with the public interest and welfare in mind, and whereas she discharged these important responsibilities in a manner reflecting great credit upon herself and the board, and whereas her colleagues wish to express to her high esteem and regard, now therefore be it resolved, this 11th day of May 2018, that the members of the California State Board of Behavioral Sciences express our heartfelt appreciation to Renee Lahner for the outstanding contribution that she made during her term and service to the board. That's what this says, but personally, I would like to say that I have just really appreciated Renee's guidance, and she's been a mentor to me when I first came on the board. She got me all up to speed about what these professions were all about, and when I served as chair, she was a very, very good mentor for me, and I'm just going to miss her tremendously, and I'm sure that the board shares my sentiment, so thank you.
Oh, wow.
Thank you.
Thank you for all of everything. Thank you so much.
Been a ride.
What I do over there?
Here we go.
There we go. Got to do the top. Thank you. You have to say that. It doesn't. Great.
Okay, Ms. Lahner has a few words she'd like to share.
Yeah.
So first I want to apologize.
After 11 years.
Yeah. Kind of says it all, right? Okay. So first I want to apologize to those of you who've heard most of these sentiments 4 years ago at what turned out to be a false alarm. And speaking of hearing it again, I first want to thank my family, my husband, son, and daughter-in-law for being here. It means a great deal to me. I'm most appreciative of the remarkable honor I've had over the past 11 plus years. Serving on this board has been a privilege and one of the absolute highlights of my career. When one is fortunate enough to have a long career, and I'm not retiring, by the way, one of the challenges is to remain challenged. Well, you can bet this board has helped a lot in that regard. I want to thank my fellow board members for their ability to be outstanding leaders and team members all at the same time. The board is organic in a sense and grows as a body of wisdom as the individuals find their place and voice and then create an effective working group. I'm honored to have been a part of this collaborative process, and I just want to say, as someone who's a part of many working groups, this one is just plain outstanding. I also want to thank our wonderful stakeholders for partnering with us so we can all stay focused on the needs of California consumers and mental health professionals. They have been tireless in working with us, and that effort shows in what can only be called monumental accomplishments over the past several years. And of course, none of these major accomplishments would have been possible without an excellent executive officer, Kim Madsen, and staff. The entire staff is knowledgeable and so generous in sharing their expertise. One staff member has the dubious honor of managing all things related to board members. And I just want to say that she needs to be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. It's hot, it's cold. Didn't I order this? Thank you, Christina Kitamura. You're one in a million, and we all appreciate you. I'm not sure yet what'll take the place of reading cases on many Sunday afternoons, but somehow I think it'll work out, and our FedEx guy is looking for a second job, too. Thank you all for your kindness, generosity, and friendship. I will miss you. And I'd love to join you for dinner when you're in our neck of the woods. Thank you.
I would also like to acknowledge Samara Ashley and Sarita Kohli. Their last days with us were yesterday. They too are leaving the board after their tenure, so we have 3 members leaving as of this week. As calculated, to the best of my knowledge, that's 28 years of historical knowledge that's leaving this board at the end of today. That's a lot. And we really appreciate it because the 3 of you have added to the continuity and the integrity of this board. And without mentors, as Christine, Dr. Whitlisbach mentioned, those of us who are public members and even other licensees are at a loss with the background information that you guys bring to the board. And we really, really appreciate it. And your loss is going to be felt. And we really appreciate all of the work that you've done and wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Piggyback just
Okay.
a little bit. I'll try to keep it short. With the departure of Renee, Samara, and Sarita, each of you were with me at the beginning. I think Renee was first. And your perspective and support during those fun times, and then they got super ugly. We had a perfect storm. But it was the stability of the board that really allowed us to continue to move forward and do our work. And I don't think that would have been possible had we not had your perspective, Renee, and that of Samara too, because it all kind of started when they all came on board. So the work that we've been able to accomplish in that time has been fantastic. It's for the betterment of the profession, and having that steady guiding direction was very, very helpful. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Moving on to the next item, which is election of board chair and vice chair. And before we start that, I'd just like to say that it was 2 years ago in this hotel where I was elected as chair 2 years ago. I think I said that. That's redundant. Exactly in this hotel, different room that I can remember. And I just want to say that it has been a real pleasure and a real honor to serve as your chair. Moving forward, certainly we'll be here for any kind of transition that anyone, whoever becomes the new chair, needs, and I can provide background or any kind of information from the last 2 years that one might need. So with that, thank you very much. It has been great. You guys are great players, and I really appreciate your professionalism. This board is a board to be really proud of, very proud of. We act as a team, and everyone knows it takes a village. It's my pleasure. Okay, so I'm going to entertain a nomination for chair. Okay. Okay. I gotta get, officially I need to get it out there. So I would like to entertain a nomination. Miss Dr. Whitlisbach.
Thank you. I'd like to nominate Betty Conley for chair.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? Okay, is there a second?
Yes.
Oh, okay. It's
Okay.
fine.
Ms.
I'm a
Launer?
lame duck, give it to me.
Ms. Launer made the second. Any other discussion? Okay, Christina?
I would like to ask Betty if she accepts the nomination.
Oh, I'm sorry, Betty, do you accept?
It does.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, here's the vote. Renee Launer.
Yes.
Dr. Christine Whitlisbaugh.
Yes.
Dr. Peter Chu.
Yes.
Betty Conley.
Yes, you can.
Yes. Deborah Brown.
Yes.
Christina Wong.
Yes.
Dr. Leah Brew.
Yes.
Jonathan Maddox.
Yes.
Max Disposti.
Absolutely.
Motion carries. We have a new chair.
The next one is for vice chair. Is there a nomination? Yes, Betty?
I'd like to nominate Peter.
Peter?
Thanks for the confidence. I have to respectfully decline.
Okay.
I'm going to do a full Sherman. You know, the Sherman is nominated, not accepted, is elected. No. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Is there any other nomination for vice chair? Christine?
Max Disposi?
Well, thank you. I'm honored. I actually was entertaining the idea. I have just a big concern because as you know, I'm running a nonprofit that's growing tremendously, and it's always really, really hard. And when I commit to something, I'm really fully involved and engaged. Because we have been always looking at the vice chair position as someone is going to become a chair, not necessarily, it's not the law, but usually we'll give the vice chair the opportunity to be mentored. I'm a little bit concerned about the coming up next 2 years in relations to that development for my responsibility statewide. So that's the only concern I have.
Can I respond?
Yes.
You respond? Oh boy. I'm in trouble now.
So, of course, I don't want you to feel pressured.
No, absolutely.
Okay, of course not. But not every vice chair becomes chair, especially when a chair is taking it for the first year, because
Right.
a lot of times the chair will do 2 terms. Patricia Locke Dawson did
Right.
not do. So I'm just saying, it doesn't always have to lead to that. So I don't know. Put it out there.
And
You may
you
not
got
have
it,
the
and you
time.
can decline.
I have a
I just
comment,
wanted
too.
to. Yes, Renee.
I don't want you to feel pressured either. However,
To the public, this is pressure, but yes.
However, I echo that the vice chair doesn't have to move into being
Okay.
chair. And with the 3 of us off the board, there are 5 vacancies.
Right.
So it would give time, the 2 years would give time to bring some of the new people up to speed. And then, so there would not have to be an expectation, but it would give continuity.
I appreciate that, and I'm honored, and I definitely accept the recommendation. So thank you. I didn't want to be begged for it because I don't want to put anybody in that situation. I wanted to be straightforward about my concern was just in relations to my workload. Otherwise, I'm absolutely honored to be working with the team and giving back even more. So.
Okay. Yes, Peter?
May I have the honor to second the motion
Oh,
to
thank you, Peter.
nominate Max as our vice chair?
And Max, just, if things change in the middle, there's always that opportunity to step back, so.
Right.
And that's perfectly acceptable.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Thanks for your support.
But I'm going to make it so fantastic, you're not going to want to do that.
I am afraid so. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Yes.
Any other further discussion? Okay, the vote, please.
Renee Launer. Yes. Dr. Christine Whitlisbaugh.
Yes.
Dr. Peter Chu.
Yes.
Betty Conley.
Yes.
Deborah Brown.
Yes.
Christina Wong.
Yes.
Dr. Leah Brew.
Yes.
Jonathan Maddox.
Yes.
Max Disposti.
Yes.
The motion carries, and we have a new vice chair.
I thought she was going to pass the flowers on. It's a rotating flower bunch. Okay, we're going to move on now
it work.
to the executive officers report. So, Ms. Mattson?
Okay, so a little change in our budget. We recently, our initial budget was $11,657,000, and it's now been increased to $12,047,000. And the reason that the updated figure, or the reason the budget increased is that we augmented our AG line. We noticed that we were going to be overspending again, and unlike in years past where I've been able to absorb it through the bottom line, we noticed that that was a high probability that that was not going to happen. So we increased our spending authority there, and we should be sufficient. Oddly enough, we never had a budget line item for court reporters yet. We use them year in and year out, so we got that adjusted as well. Fiscal is still in the early implementation stages. This is the new accounting system that has been deployed statewide. Consequently, we are still having our challenges in obtaining the monthly update in our spending and revenue collection. But through our own budget analyst, she internally tracks all the invoices that we get, and then the budget office from DCA has been able to give us some updated numbers. What you see before you is everything related to our budgets and our expenditures, and the percentage of our budget that we've spent so far is as a result of all the information that we have currently. Noting that we're only another, 45 days away from the end of the fiscal year, it makes me a little nervous. And so we recently sat down with the budget office and asked them to dive in deeper to look at projections for the end of the year to see if we're going to be, reverting money back or overspending. And DCA Budget Office has assured us that we are not going to overspend our budget. And in fact, they're projecting a $170,000 reversion. So we're feeling pretty good about that. And that aligns really well with what we've been able to do in the past years. Historically, we revert around 200,000 or more. So I'm feeling a little more confident about budgets. Our general loan fund repayment is slowly coming to an end. We have gotten $3 million this fiscal year. We're projected to get the last 3.3 in the next fiscal year, so we should be fine. And we're currently projecting a fund reserve of 5.4 months. Statutorily, we're not allowed to have more than 24 months in a reserve, and so we're a little ways away from that. One item I really wanted to bring to your attention today in particular was the topic of pro rata. Pro rata is our share of service, centralized services that DCA provides. So this is legal, budget office, personnel, training, and et cetera. Each department pays their fair share of pro rata, and the calculation is based on two different things. One is your position count, and two, it's determine how much your share of pro rata will be. And currently, the board pays nearly $2.5 million in pro rata. What's concerning, and why I'm bringing this up today, is that Senate Bill 173 was signed into law last legislative session, and it becomes effective this July. And this is the bill that removes the Department of Real Estate from under the DCA umbrella, and therefore with that move, some of their pro rata has to be absorbed. So it's really putting an impact on the DCA budget, and they're estimating it's about a $5 million shortfall. And so what DCA has done, number one, they have created a pro rata work group, and I do sit on that group. And we have spent a couple of meetings identifying some of the centralized services that could be streamlined, reduced, or eliminated just to make it more efficient. Additionally, DCA has proposed 2 solutions to minimize the impact of the real estate department's departure to the remaining boards and bureaus. The first one is they're doing a reduction in staff. And then the second is they're exiting out Department of Real Estate in a phased process. So when they leave, we're not going to necessarily have to absorb all $5 million pro rata from real estate right away. It'll be phased out. And they believe that the balance between the phase-in approach and the reduction in services, as well as the reduction in staff members, should balance that out, so there'll be minimal impact to the boards. And then just as an aside, annually, because there's always adjustments in employee compensation, our pro rata has been increasing. This year, they anticipated it will increase by $70,000. And that's retirement contributions, it's benefits, it's whatever works out in the union. So wanted to make you aware of that. I do know that the goal of DCA is not to adversely impact the boards and the bureaus and with increased pro rata costs, because along with that comes our concern that services, are we going to get them? So they're trying to balance all of that out, but the main goal is not to adversely impact us. And so that's why I joined the pro rata group, to have my 2 cents. So any questions about that?
So how does the pro rata being spread across different boards? Are there any criterias?
Yeah, the criteria is the number of staff members you have, your position count. So we're at just above 60. And then it's how much you use the service, like for printing, for example, how many times you send stuff down to print. So it's a usage charge. So let me think about this. So just for a really quick explanation, if legal was not included in the global pro rata and they were billing us by hour, that's a usage charge. So that's what we do for printing costs. Now for personnel and Office of Human Resources and legal, that's position count. And so it's sort of spread out amongst the boards. So it essentially means that we can pick up the phone anytime and get those services. That's the intent. Yeah, yes.
Does that include just the building usage and everything
Yeah.
like that?
Yeah.
So it's the housing, it's the
Yeah, and you can find if you look at the budget sheet that's in the packet, you'll see departmental pro rata, and that's our pro rata. That it's right about
I got it.
midway. So
Yeah.
it's everything. So there's public affairs,
I
the
got it.
people. Yeah. Now the building is a separate. That's our rent is separate. You'll find that in the operating expense
Oh, so
and
that's
equipment.
not in the pro
Nope.
rata?
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah. Boy, I wish it was. Our rent might be
Because I was
lower.
going to go, I was probably not
Yeah.
bad bargain.
But, it's the services, the support services we get for Breeze, any kind of modification. Then, statewide pro rata, they have a zero there, but there's some pro rata that goes to support the state agency above us, so. I think we're going to be okay, but we shall see. Okay, if there's no more questions, the other budget-related item I wanted to update you about is the board fee audit. And Steve and staff met with a potential vendor just last week. Yeah, you might as well take this one.
So yeah, we met with, we had a phone conversation with CPS Capital, oh my gosh, CPS. And they're going to be doing our audit, I believe. So we're working out contracts with them right now. Staff is actually this week. Hopefully we'll get a signature on a contract next week. And work will begin hopefully probably in August or September. And we're hopefully have an audit done sometime the beginning of next year, not fiscal year, calendar year. So June or February. And then we'll proceed on from there. So looks like we're not at a lot of our statutory maximums yet, so we're gonna, moving forward, I've never done one before, so a fee audit, but what we're looking at is piecemealing, seeing what we can get through with regulations, and then what we're gonna have to actually do a statutory change to, so we have to strategize that later on, so, but, yeah.
Yeah, so,
So
yes.
when's the last time we have a fee audit?
Well, let's see, we're in 2018, and I don't know that they ever did one, to be quite honest with you. As far as I can tell, there hasn't been an increase. I know there hasn't been an increase in fees since 2000. I do know that at one point, we had more than 24 months in reserve, and when you hit that benchmark, then you have to reduce fees for a period of time, and I believe they did that in 04, 05, Riches was the
Gotta
EO
know
at the
4 or
time.
5,
Yeah, so, and I can tell you that if you look nationwide, we are a bargain.
Well, for MFT.
Yeah, we are the screaming
Not
deal,
for
let me tell you.
LPCs. Right.
LPCs are good.
LPCCs are good. So this is just really going to give us an opportunity. We've had such significant growth in staff And the fees are really met, since we're self-funded, the fees really should be supporting all of the services. And that's from administrative services that Christina and some of our other admin staff provide, all the way through enforcement. And the exams and just everything that we do. So it's pretty remarkable we've been able to kind of make it this far. Of course, when you get to the edge of your budget line, then that tends to trigger loan repayments, which has not been a bad thing. So, yeah, I mean, the balance, we've been balancing it really well, but, the writing's on the wall. At some point, we're going to have to do something, so here we are.
So do we just look at internally the expenses and the fee, and then also do we compare with the other boards?
No. So what they'll do is they kind of got a basic overview of what they do. First of all, you look at the workflow and how things are processed, and come up to like how many hours per application or what fees we charge and relate it to that. So, but that includes, like, I'm assuming that, like, if you do an initial license application, you not only can include the time that opening the mail to cashiering it, to going through the licensing evaluation process, and then enforcement component in that too. And you're going to come up with this whole, like, how many hours, and then look at the rates and do figures from there and see if it actually makes sense. And looking at the hourly rates for the people that are actually doing the job. So
it's all internal.
It's a very internal. It's not looking outside to do any sort of evaluation as they compare to other.
Oh, Steve, I'm sorry, I don't remember what percentage of our budget, I mean, in terms of dollar amount coming out of, like the fees, in terms of dollar amount consists roughly what percentage of our annual budget?
Fees for our budget?
Yeah.
We used to be able to report that, and right now we just, honestly, we don't. I mean, all the fees support everything. A really good example is with the $100 exam fee, approximately $30 of that goes to pay for the exam. So the remaining balance funds all the activities related to processing that exam, opening the mail, cashiering that application, approving that application, and then moving forward.
I guess I asked the question because I'm looking at the long-term picture.
Right.
Because there will be a budget crunch somewhere down the road.
Oh, yeah.
And what is the administration or the governor's expectation, each agency, how self-sufficient they are? Mm-hmm. So in terms of resetting our fee, I think we should keep that in mind. That's why I want to get some general idea whether it's possible that we will be totally self-sufficient just with the licensing fees.
We should be. Yeah, that's the goal, to be self-sufficient and account for a little bit of growth moving forward.
And that's what we were talking to them. It's going to be within part of their job is going to be looking at in the next 5 years and kind of doing and see what steps we might actually want to do and consider. Mm-hmm. So,
is there any thought after the fee audit is done whether there's going to be any adjustments around equity across licenses where everyone's license will pay similar fees, or will there still be the disparity?
I think that's important. I think equity across the board is important. I mean, for example, again, the exam fee to take the law and ethics, doesn't matter what profession you are, it's $100. Right, right now we have a disparity. LPCCs we're set at $180. And, the renewal for a social worker is $110 right now, and it's $140 for MFTs. So, and just from a historical perspective, the LPCC's fee was set higher because bringing on a new program, there was some concern from the other associations that they would be funding the activities of the LPCC program. And so we have always known that we'd circle back and sort of revisit that. But I have purposely held off because we went through exam restructure. We've had significant growth on the population, and I was waiting for things to sort of stabilize, and we're at that point now.
Okay.
and the parity too. I mean, really the job for the evaluation, the workload is really the same across all license types.
Yeah.
I mean, there's really no difference there.
Right.
So.
I know you guys like to say there is, but there isn't.
For processing,
The
there's no
processing
difference.
is
The processing
similar,
of an
yeah,
application
yeah.
and the workload is pretty much the same.
Yeah,
So.
we count hours, we see education. So. at any rate. So when that audit is done, absolutely, then we'll bring it back to the board for a decision and discussion. And I'm hoping out of the audit, we can get a couple of recommendations from the vendor that shows us, if fees are at X amount, it looks like this versus that amount. Because I think the last thing, I think it would behoove us to set them and leave them there for a little bit. And instead of the ongoing, well, maybe we need to raise another $10, and just having that constant pain. So we'll see. Are there any other questions?
So so after the fee audit, will the recommended number of the dollars brought, bring back to the board?
Oh, absolutely.
Because, that requires statutory changes, right?
You will either do it through a statute change or through a regulation change, depending where we can. Yeah. And we'll make them emergency regs if we have to do them regulation. So, okay. So we continue to run pretty well operationally. This last quarter, we saw the application volume drop 12%, and I promise you that the next report, that thing is going to jump. It's called graduation season. I promise you. We call it major job security, or the avalanche season in the office. The third quarter, we also saw our processing times reduce, which is good. We issued nearly 1,400 initial licenses, and as of the end of April, we have 111,641 licensees and registrants. Again, mental health job security continues to grow and be good. I'm just going to point this out, too, within our licensing totals. California leads the nation in the number of LMFTs in the country, and we are for social workers, we are knocking on the door. We're only second behind New York. We're about 600, a little over 600 licensees less than New York. And if we keep growing at the rate that we've been growing, I anticipate we're going to surpass New York and be number one there. So that's going to be exciting. And for LPCCs, for the short period of time that we've been licensing these folks, we rank 21st across the nation. So we continue to lead the way. Yeah, it's pretty exciting. Yeah. Yes, GV's happy, yes. Whoop, whoop. Yeah. Go LPCC. Yeah, I know.
Kim, just a quick question about that. Are there any data analysis about or reasoning behind that growth as well, beyond what we have discussed so far? Is there any speculation or?
I think we have more, the use of the social work exam has really improved portability. So I think that's part of it. The other part of it is I believe that we are seeing folks get through the licensing process a little quicker. Okay. With the new structure, with the exams, I think that's good. And, nationally, I think we're the 5th or 8th largest economy in the world. So despite the high cost of living out here.
We just surpassed Britain.
Surpassed who?
England,
Great Britain. Yeah. I mean, we talk about how expensive it is to live out here, but it still seems to be a very desirable place to come. So, and we have a lot of schools out here. You go back east, if you look at the UC system, I think we have 8 UCs, and you go to maybe Nebraska, maybe you've got 2 or 3 schools to choose from. And here you have 8 UCs, and then you have the whole CSUS system, which is
23.
Yeah. So you've got some good options.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So
Thank
bring
you.
it. Yes.
So Kim, now we all know that this is the season for graduation.
Oh, yeah.
So do you anticipate any delay of the processing time for the new licensees?
Just inherently
registrants?
normal. Right now, we're under 30 days for registration for a clean app. That's no background check. Everything came back good. But as we get into volumes, I mean, you get several thousand applications in a month. It's going to increase. So I think it's reasonable to see a 45-day processing, and in some cases, maybe 60. And people just need to employ that word patience.
Yes.
We are getting through them. And I know that our licensing manager has been working on that cross-training and making sure that, all hands are on deck. So we're going to be good.
And so my follow-up question is that, so a few years, we were looking at the possibility of online application.
Mhm.
So is it still in the works?
We have a few. Steve's looking at that pretty in depth. I'll let you speak to that.
For the online application process, I'm starting to think about it. It's a little, we've been real hesitant because of the complexity of what we need to actually hand in with that application. But it definitely is something that's on the forefront. We are getting other applications online. It's in the mix. We're working with Breeze right now. Testing, like we're looking at the law and ethics exam to go online. Not the exam itself, but the application. That would be cool. And then the retake exam. So some of the little minor applications. But we've been, with the conversations with Breathe and such, I'm getting a little more confidence that we could actually put, and once again, I always say this in these meetings and staff hasn't heard me say this, but the application for the interns possibly online, I think that's not too far off, meaning maybe next year. Or
No
like the end of
Yeah.
next year. I mean, but I definitely am going to be looking at that and seeing if we can move forward with that. So
Right. But it's when the application comes in and it's clean, meaning we've got the fee, the app, the fingerprints, and the transcripts. Once all of those requirements are satisfied, the registration number issues immediately.
Right.
So, I mean, that in itself is a big improvement.
Right.
But MFT apps alone, I'm sure we're going to see 4,000. Yeah, in 1 month. So.
well, and that's the thing with Breeze too, is it would be accepting an application and a fee. We'd still go through the review process.
Right.
It'll cut down the mailing time and the cashiering time, which is about 2 weeks maybe. So save 2 weeks in processing time.
Yeah. So, our exam information continues to be, the totals and such are robust. We issued over 4,500, over 4,500 examinations were conducted. We're including the pass rates for the exams, and it's starting to level off and look a little more consistent.
Yes. Do you want me to wait?
No, that's fine.
So they may be leveling off except for the LEPs.
Right, but that's interesting.
That's a huge change.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you look at all of the other licenses, they're leveling off quite nicely.
Mm-hmm. But that one-
LEPs have dropped by percentage of pass rate has gone from 57% for first time to 25%.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
a small, I know.
Yeah, it's a very small number.
But, I mean, is this a new exam as well, I'm assuming? No, or is it the same? We didn't update the LEP exam?
I know that they've been working on it. I don't know when the versions changed. Do you?
No, I don't think it's changed.
And nothing's
You
changed.
don't think it's changed?
No.
But
we can look into that.
We can look
and
into
see.
that.
I don't know, if we could just poke at that just a teeny bit.
Sure.
It may, as Renee said, it may just be that the N is so small
It is.
that a very small number
Mhm.
could grossly alter that
It'll skew it.
statistic.
Mhm.
It'll skew it.
Do you-
But it's just looking at face value, it's just.
It's like, wow, yeah.
Just
What-
a little terrifying.
What we'll do is, we'll speak with OPES and I'll get back
Thank
to you.
you.
You
Thank
bet.
you.
You bet. And then national exams, the pass rates are comparable. We did 11 exam workshops last quarter. And we did ASWB, their national exam, they did, they released a new version, and that's based off their most recent, they call it a practice analysis, we call it occupational analysis, it's the same thing. Essentially, it's a survey of the practice. And so now, but when they wanted us to know that they used over 25,000 social workers nationally to develop the exam. And I can tell you that California does participate in that. We've had a couple of California representatives working on developing the national exam, and I'm pretty pleased with our representation, so I'm excited about that. We're working on the LPCC occupational analysis. It looks like it's nearly done. They're writing the report as we speak, and we should have it in June. And then finally, with respect to the exam, Steve and I and our exam manager, Gina Bayless, have been tirelessly working with OPES and PSI to resolve some of the candidate concerns. We are in a grace period with PSI as a test vendor. I'm aware of other vendors that offer computer-based testing. One in particular offers the ability to test on military bases. They provide increased security to identify the candidate coming in and coming out. And almost every proctor in that exam center is one of their trained employees, and they have to recertify every year. So it provides just, in our mind, our experience, it looked like it was a higher professional experience. And so we've been toying around with the idea of just doing our own exam contract. And I know that we're going to work on it. We're drafting the proposal as we speak, and we'll see what happens. I know DCA wants to kind of partner with us a little bit, or wants us to wait. I'm a little frustrated with PSI. I'm just so I don't know how I don't know how to put it any other way. And I've heard through the industry that they are going through some organizational changes. So, and that might account for some of the situations that we've encountered. But I think our candidates just deserve a better experience in that environment. And I hope that we can find a vendor that will provide it.
So I know sometimes after the test, the candidate actually, would take a satisfactory survey, and I wonder if those survey results are being shared with the staff, knowing their experience, because I think that would be a really good consideration, whether we should be continuing to use a PSI as our contractor, our vendor.
Yeah, I don't. Are they?
We have access to those. We can look at them. Surveys, satisfactory surveys. I mean, they're going to support what we're saying here probably, because nobody's going to take the time unless they want to complain. I mean, honestly. So, I mean, but we do have access to those, and we can see them. So, I just kind of take those with a grain of salt, though. Usually,
but we've had PSI for 10 plus years, and.
Oh, yeah, but it's a consideration. No,
It's
like,
a consideration,
we have to.
yeah. But I think moving forward, things that we are looking to provide the candidates is the ease of scheduling. So with the younger candidates coming through, if it's not an app, I don't know about it on the phone. So you want to have that. Some of the features that we are considering is maybe some direct pay to the vendor that we have with the 2 national exams. They pay them directly. They don't pay us. And the ease of scheduling, they can schedule immediately right after, even if there's a waiting period. And so some of that flexibility will reduce a little bit of anxiety for the candidates.
Or giving left-handed mouses
Oh
to
my
people
gosh.
who,
Yeah.
and saying, no, it's
Yeah.
a disability and you have to
Yeah.
report it ahead
Yeah.
of time.
So,
Kim?
yes.
I'm sorry. Is there a way for us to maybe have a fact sheet, put up with just the concerns with PSI, so we can kind of review them as a board to just get a sense of
Sure.
what the overall challenges are, so that
Right.
we could
Right.
intelligently inform whatever it is that we're looking at.
I think that we can probably pull right from the portal
probably
where
got a
they
fact
file
sheet
the
already, actually.
complaints.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure Gina's just
Wait,
going,
she probably emailed me already after listening
Yeah,
to that.
Gina's probably pulling her hair out right
No,
now.
we could do that.
So, and maybe we could combine those concerns with what it is that we'd actually like, so on one
Right.
side have the concerns, the other side have,
Right.
ideally, this is what we'd want from a vendor.
Right, right. And that's part of the process that we're going through right now, actually, when we put out the bid to go. But yeah, we'll see. I don't have it. We're toying with it, and I keep moving that way. I just, I like being able to have a little more hands-on with our vendor than we have right now.
The direct link, too, is a big thing. I mean,
Yeah.
having an intermediary between the board and the contractor.
And that's
think
been
it's
kind of a
really-
challenge. Yeah, we have to go through a liaison, and that liaison represents all boards and bureaus. And
Pretty busy, has a lot of
And so I like the direct link. We've had such a positive experience with MBCC and ASWB that really sort of opened our eyes that there was another way.
So Kim, I want to go back to the passing rate. So I just want to let the board and the staff know that that by school, that it's a very, very useful data.
Yes.
For the this at least for my license type for the social workers. So and I noticed that it's not included in the packet this time. So I wonder,
Do
if.
you want it included in the package?
Yeah, I think
you
it was
know,
just an
has been.
oversight.
Yeah. They love it because they
Yeah.
look at it, oh, I passed. I'm like, the how many percentage, so I think it would be really great to include it in the packet next time.
We have, and that's my fault. I've been a traveling fool all of
And a
April.
proud
I think I was
grandma.
home maybe a day and a half on a weekend all month, and then we had a little arrival. So
Yes. Well, we know how grandparenthood would do.
yeah, I have grandparent brain right now. So, but yeah, we'll make sure that gets in next time. You bet. You bet. So through the administration program, we've got in the third quarter almost 8,600 applications, and that's not including the renewals. And then I'm really happy to see that our online renewal processing, the use of that is going up. It's at 49%, so just a little more. We're just surpassing a bit of the mail-in process. So there's still some folks that like that paper. Our enforcement program. Oh, yeah. I understand that. Paper's just, it's good. So we had 358 consumer complaints and 250 criminal conviction notifications last quarter. We closed 595 cases. We sent 51 cases to the AG's office for formal discipline. We filed 60 accusations, 20 statement of issues, and the final citation total in this last quarter is 66. So we're busy. Most of those citations are related to the CE audit. Formal discipline, the last quarter was 748, and we're averaging year-to-date 704. Again, so what's key is when we calculate the time that the AG office has it, they have it just over a year at 478 days, and they're averaging 460 days to finish it. Our end of it, we do it in 125 days, averaging 133 for the year. So I think it just continues to highlight that there's a lot of work going over to the AG's office, and when you do that, it also involves the coordination of the Office of Administrative Hearings, and so you're at their their workflow we can't really influence, and so that's kind of a sad thing, but I do know that they're still staffing up, and we're still trying to settle where we can. So we'll just keep plugging at it. Yes.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, it occurs to me, we have all the disciplinary cases. Do you know whether this is evenly distributed in all the different category licensees, so there's no one particular license type would have higher percentage of disciplinary cases?
I think we don't really break it down that way, but just by nature, because if you look at our population totals, most of them are probably from the MFT, and then you go down to the social workers, and then you go down to LPCC, and LEPs are pretty slim.
Yeah, so I'm just suggesting in the near future, just keep that in mind, just in terms of percentage. I mean, as a agency, I think that's potentially we identify whether there's any problem. I'm not suggesting that there is, but it's just like doesn't. I don't want to create more work, but just if you happen to pay attention, then yeah.
So there, alrighty, and then CE audits total. We've not audited 136 licensees. The pass rate overall is 69%. We still have about 27% failing. And again, the reason they're failing is consistent. The required coursework, taking it from an unapproved provider, or missing first-time requirements. Yes.
Ask a question about that. So the last one is a little more, I guess, concerning to me. I'm wondering, does the board, or do we have anywhere sort of on our website of sort of identified CE vendors so that students or registrants know to vet whoever they're using by that list? We do?
Yeah, it's not necessarily a list. What it is it's we advise them to take them from either a provider that is associated with one of the approval agencies that we list, or an approved CE provider, which could be someone like NASW California chapter.
APA, something like
yeah,
that.
something like that, yeah.
Okay.
Or a school. And it's really, I think what we're seeing is, we haven't audited consistently for quite a number of years.
Sure.
And so now we're catching people off guard that what may have overlooked doing their CEUs,
Sure.
and now they're scrambling.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and I think too, just being a clinician, people wait to the last minute and I have to get it done tonight, and so they just find something, do it, and find out afterwards it wasn't the right
Yeah.
company. Okay.
And I would also say some of those procrastinators might be people who are not very involved in their organizations and may not be paying attention to, hey, we changed the rules 5 years ago about who and how you can get CEs. So I think that might be part of it too.
Yes, I would agree.
So I've had the question come up, if you did not take, if you didn't comply with the requirements for the first cycles, where there were those very prescriptive courses that had to be taken. And what I've heard from just the question from some of our licensees is, what if we didn't take it? We're now, we renewed our license already, so there's no way, I mean, even if they took it now, if there was an audit, they'd be out of compliance. So what would be the board's recommendation for someone who's in that position? Is there, what should they be doing?
Because we only audit for the previous year.
Well, for the previous
cycle, right.
So
and
that
they
could
forgot to
be-
take it.
So I'm just saying, for example, LEPs are new to this, they're not new, but from when it was implemented. And so, again, people who didn't pay attention renewed their licenses without taking the required, maybe they had the CEU units, but they didn't have the required courses. They're now in the position of,
They might be audited.
what could I do? Because
Nothing.
is there there's no way to remediate
Well,
that?
here's what I would suggest. If they're audited, then they are definitely going to be tagged because they didn't complete the
Right.
required coursework. So to mitigate that, they might want to think about completing it now. And that might, because we're going to require that anyway in the CE, in the cite and fine. So that might provide mitigation to perhaps we might consider reducing the fine.
Okay,
So, but it just depends on the circumstance.
okay,
So,
thank you. I think that's good information for people to know.
yeah, I do too, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Kim, we had talked about before, somewhere, and I can't remember where and when, reevaluating the continuing education requirements to see if they're, I mean, I don't know, I just remember us having a conversation at some point about that.
Oh,
Was it
in
the
terms of all the
strategic plan?
required coursework?
Yeah, is that something?
It's on our to-do list. I know
Okay, good.
Christy has been looking at it, but that's, again, going to be a regulation change, and when we get to the end of the meeting, you'll see it's a really cumbersome process right now.
Okay.
So, yeah. All righty, and as Deborah mentioned, we're busy in outreach. Actually, between the board staff and I, we've done 14 total outreach events. Both staff attended all the professional conferences that were held in the spring, which was really awesome. And then I spoke at the CalPIC conference, and that was kind of interesting. It was on professional conduct and their repercussions. That was fun. I really enjoyed that. And it was well received. I had to miss the camped event, but the staff was there. My grandson was thinking about coming early. And then I do want to share with the board, I have been approved to go back to Halifax, Nova Scotia, to attend the ASWB Spring Education Conference. During that conference, I will be presenting about how I work with a composite board, as well as our framework for license portability. So I have 2 sessions there, and so that's they are stoked I'm coming back. So I'm really, really excited about that, and to be able to share our work since we attended in November, what we have done to move portability forward. So that's going to be really exciting to share. Yes.
So I have a question. So I'm wondering, in terms of outreach activities, what sort of ideas the board is considering, or around sort of what role we could play in supporting increasing diversity in our workforce? one of the things that we know is a challenge is that people of color and marginalized communities are really underrepresented in this profession. And so I know a lot of these activities are important, but I'm wondering sort of what the diversity makeup looks like, and could we talk about what a strategic plan could be for if targeting activities and locations where we could actually talk to and speak to underrepresented communities so that we can better reflect the communities that we serve, because we're a very diverse state. And so I'm wondering, has any thought been given to that? And can we pick that up?
I
moving
would say that
forward?
we haven't done it specifically targeted that way. I mean, what we've done is just gone into events where, we're going to get a large population of
Sure.
individuals. I recently spoke at USC,
Sure.
School of Social Work, and the diversity that was represented there was really impressive, really impressive. One of the fact-finding information events that Steve and I, Roseanne and Christy went on was when we went to Southern California Counseling and saw what they were doing and looked at their peer component and how that was going into an underserved area as well, and bringing people in that way. But if we could figure out how to do that, boy, I'd be all over it.
Okay. So that sounds like that's something we could entertain. as a
Well, oh
board, so
yeah. No, I
do
think
that.
I think getting the word out is great, and I think there's been some inroads just in the media generally with the mental health campaigns to reduce the stigma that some of the cultures may have
Sure.
in seeking that treatment. And I think the more that we can further that and increase that information,
Sure.
it's better.
Sure. And I just have one more. I mean, I think one of the activities that could be considered is going on the college campuses and catching people in their bachelor program, social work, psychology, and having conversations around sort of
Yeah.
the need and sort of what's out there. And so I'd be interested in participating. in
Okay,
that.
that's great. Yeah, definitely. Yes.
So, addressing what Jonathan's, suggestion, so we talked about using the ESL data, as in one of the possible, indicator, to see,
Right.
the diversity. Because, for those who, if we see the application and also with the number of approval, then I think it will give us a really good glimpse of at least not, by race and ethnicity, but at least we know that, how many of the, the practitioner with a second language that come in, and I think that would be a really good way, to also see that, without much work.
Okay.
But my only concern with that would be is that if we only do what's easiest and we only target ESL language, then we leave out a whole community of people who speak English naturally, like Black people,
Right.
native-born people. So I'm
Part
actually,
of it, yeah.
so I'm speaking to, we can do both and, but I think we
Absolutely.
specifically need to target communities of color, Black communities.
Yeah, I
in
think it'd be
particular.
nice to get to some college fair days or things like that, where,
I think,
people are talking about professions.
Or building relations, like creating an approved PowerPoint and going to different psychology, social work classes on campus and presenting the
Right.
material,
Right.
having conversations, and then letting people know that there are practitioners of color who do this,
Right,
and this is a great field to come into and things
absolutely.
like that.
Okay.
So both and.
I think
Okay.
sometimes, going to job fairs, that would be a really good way to, to do recruitment and, not recruitment, but, information sharing.
Yes.
And so, and then and then planting an early seed about, what licensed professional, the jobs and the licensing requirement process, that might be, pretty cost-effective way to, to reach out for the diversity also.
Okay. Well, definitely think of, yeah. No, thank you for the suggestion. It's a good one. All righty. And we've talked about this a little bit, the board move. We're still moving.
So I want to just add one more
Yeah.
outreach activity. Actually, Steve and
yes.
the couple of the staff went up to Chico State, CSU Chico, and did a wonderful presentation about the whole licensing process. So I wanted to thank Steve and Darlene York and also Michelle Diaz. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
No, that was great. Thank you, because
And that's on April 6th. if you
6th,
wanna
I
put it
put-
on the
yeah.
record.
Yes.
And really quick, as staff, as we're talking about what we used to be doing, actually, is we'd get a campus and then invite other campuses there to centralize it. So we're talking about that, which would kind of what you're talking about earlier.
Be good. Okay, and because we've grown, we've outgrown our suite. If you've been in our office, you've seen that our file system is at a separate location than under our roof. But our suite plans to move into the suite next door. And the tenant improvements have been submitted to the appropriate authorities to approve the permits. Once we get the approvals, we'll start construction. The estimated costs right now, if you look, just to configure the suite the way that we want, the walls here and there and down and carpet and such, we're looking at approximately $331,000. About $30,000 goes to the landlord, because that's just his cut. Yeah, and then this is some furniture, so this is the cubicles and stuff. So this is to break them down, reset them where we need them, and build what we need. Just configure it the way it needs to be. That's going to be about $33,000. So total right now we're at $364,000. We did put money away for this. I know that there was $300,000 put in it's called an ARF. I have no idea what that means. But it's our little savings account, and then we're adding money to it now. I'm looking to add at least another $70,000. I know that that's okay, and we're looking at out of this year's budget to add some more money. So we're going to have enough money to cover the move. The last remaining expense is something I am just dead set on doing, and that is to get a sit-stand desk, so that we've had more and more requests for ergonomic improvements to have a sit-stand desk. I think I just want to get ahead of that and put that out there for everybody. So if you use it, great. And that at a high figure, that looks to be about $80,000 in addition. And then that would be our last remaining expense. So that's it. So, and yes.
We have a request for a 10-minute break.
10-minute break. All right.
Okay.
We're good.
So we will recess for the time being. It is 9:45, and we will come back at 9:55.
Bringing the meeting back to order. It is 10:03, and we're going to continue. Ms. Mattson?
All righty. So personnel, happy to say we had no departures and staff. That's always good. So we promoted internally one candidate to work in the criminal conviction unit. Yi Lee was previously an evaluator in the licensing unit doing LEPs. And so she, like everybody in state service, they'd like to move up. So we were happy she was the successful candidate in that endeavor. And then we picked up three new individuals. One is a seasonal clerk helping us keep our file room orderly and prepping us for the move, and two support individuals in the enforcement unit. So now the enforcement unit is fully staffed. And then we had an individual who had departed but returned, and she returned to her previous position in the MFT unit, and so we have a nice seamless transition there. We are recruiting for our two remaining vacancies. That we took one position and reclassified it to a manager, so that manager will be devoted specifically to discipline and probation unit. And Steve and I have reviewed the applications, and we will be conducting interviews at the end of the month for that position. And then we have a support position in the licensing unit. And my understanding is that interviews will be conducted here shortly. So that's that. And I think I mentioned in our previous board meeting that our request for an additional 1.5 probation analysts has been approved. And those hearings occurred, the budget hearings occurred about 2 weeks ago. And so we're moving through the process, and it's in the governor's budget, and we see no impediment to those being approved. Any questions about personnel? Okay. Strategic plan before you, what you have is our draft reporting mechanism. Staff is going to be meeting here shortly to identify the objectives and goals and actions, and we'll be reporting moving forward on this form. Yes?
Just the structure of the form doesn't make sense to me. The way we had it the last.
You like that form last
I
time?
like that format better. It was much clearer if we
Okay.
could do that visually.
Okay.
Thank you.
And also, it adds, who's responsible, because sometimes I think, that there's about the managers or, so that would probably help the staff to identify who's responsible for what and when to accomplish.
Okay. Yeah, and that's part of our meeting coming
Yeah,
up.
the targeted dates, year, actually.
This is a strategic plan, right?
Yeah.
Going back to what you had a comment, Mr. Maddox, on diversity,
Yes.
I believe that is under objective 6.4.
That's where I was headed.
Yeah, so we've already got it there. Just need to.
Create some actionable items, which I have some ideas about.
Okay, very good.
All righty. Any questions on the strategic plan? Okay. Moving forward, this is, oh gosh, such history on this. The uniform standards. So back in, oh my goodness, 08, Senate Bill 1441 was signed into law, and this bill directed DCA to create a substance abuse coordination committee. And the committee was charged with implementing the uniform standards for dealing with a substance abuse and licensee that all DCA boards and bureaus would use. So the standards were specified in the law, 1441. I think there's 14 of them. And so the committee met, and I was part of that initial committee, and we developed the criteria for testing and assessment. The committee was comprised of executive officers, some subject matter experts in the field of substance abuse treatment and recovery, and we heard a lot of information. And so essentially what happened was that the standards were created, and in October 15 is when the board incorporated them in their disciplinary guidelines. And although there was a lot of questions about whether you had to implement the standards or not, the direction from the Senate Business and Professions Committee and others was you need to implement them. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. And you'll see a lot of that history in the PowerPoint that is attached to your memo. And the PowerPoint was prepared by Executive Officer Stephanie Nunez. She's the Executive Officer for Respiratory Care, and she was also part of the initial committee as well. And so she provides a lot of history about the uniform standards, the implementation, the direction, et cetera. And I think what's really interesting is that for those boards and bureaus that hadn't adopted the standards early, as they came up for sunset review, you were asked about them. You were definitely asked about them. So we were, I wouldn't say we were a late adopter, but we were not one of the first ones to adopt. So subsequent to that, now the uniform standards, at least for us, has been in existence for about 3 years. And so Senate Bill 796 was signed in 2015, and it requires the reconvening of the Substance Abuse Coordination Committee again. And essentially, we are charged to review Uniform Standard 4, which is the testing standard, biological fluid testing, just to see if it needs to be updated, given the recent developments in some new methods of testing. And so we did meet. Some of the EOs that were present at the first time have retired, and so we have new EOs. And I attended the meeting on April 23rd, and we heard a lot of testimony from experts again about new methods of testing. There's a method of testing that we currently are starting to use. It's called the PEth test, and it can detect alcohol use and patterns of alcohol use going anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. So that's pretty good. When we developed the uniform standards, there was the hair testing and blood, the fluid testing. So now you have hair, you have fluid, you have blood, you have a test that will detect alcohol use in 2 to 4 weeks if there's a pattern of it. I didn't know, but you can test toenails. You can test fingernails. I mean, all of that's available. Yeah, and it's, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Are you open for questions, or is there more to tell us?
Just a few more
Okay.
details and then questions.
Okay.
And so at the end of that, so we sat and we heard a lot of information about new technologies, new methods of testing, from vendors that provide diversion programs, which is go to the program and not, you go to a recovery program. We don't do that. I will tell you that there is an interest from the committee to reconsider perhaps some of the testing and the testing standards and, the once a week being random. But nobody was really motivated to make a snap decision. And given that we don't have to provide a recommendation until January, we thought it was better to reconvene again. And we directed the DCA staff, which is supporting this endeavor, to provide us with some additional information. And so I'll be attending the next meeting. And that's where we are. But I wanted to let you know that we're looking at it again. So, yes.
Okay. So maybe it's just my not knowing. I don't do drugs. But what are they doing now, like with the whole legalization of cannabis? Like how is that factoring into this? Just curious.
From our perspective, we're going to treat it like alcohol. So if you're under the influence, you're under the influence. And in terms of testing what level of cannabis you have in your system, San Diego, I want to say University is doing some studies to develop, much like we have with the blood alcohol content, those kind of levels. But when I attended a meeting it's been almost a year. No, it's been early fall last year. That was 5 years away from having any kind of recommended standards. So they are working on it. So it's really following the pattern when we were really concerned with alcohol.
So it's more like like a functional impairment test when it comes to cannabis.
Right.
Okay,
That's what
just
they're
curious.
working on. Yeah, and CHP is involved in that as well. So that's where we are. Yes.
What kind of test shows alcohol use pattern for 2 to 4 weeks? Is it blood, hair?
It's called
what
a
is-
PEth test, and it's a blood test, and it tests strictly for alcohol. And we've used it. Since we went to our new testing vendor, and as you've heard through some of the testimony, it was, an open secret that our vendor, unbeknownst to me, was not testing 7 days a week. So that motivated us to find a new vendor at the end of the contract. With our new vendor, they do test 7 days a week. They do have an app on the phone, so there's no longer, I couldn't log in on my computer, I couldn't get through the phone line. So you have the computer, the phone, and now your app on your phone to log in and check in. And it is random, and we are doing weekend testing. We are doing back-to-back testing. We are mixing up the urine testing with the blood testing. Even just with the short implementation of the new vendor, the whole instituting the weekend testing, we've identified a few probationers that were consuming alcohol on the weekend. So they are now over at the Attorney General's office.
Just one more question. Is it possible, if there were to be a change made, because the 4 to 5 times a month, I'm sorry, not enough coffee apparently, is pretty onerous, time-wise, financially, every which way.
Right.
If you were this is just a question, if you were to give a probationer a choice of a blood test that will show a 2 to 4 week pattern or to continue in their random UAs, would that be a regulation? Would that be a new law?
No,
Could that be done?
We can do it. We can mix it up. The frequency is what would have to change. Because right now, the standard says at bare minimum 52 times a year to 104 during that first year of probation. If you get a year of clean tests, then you can minimize that. And at that point, it's 36 times a year, up to 104. I think because of the cost, and that's something we kicked around at the committee, you combining things, combining maybe that PEth test to detect alcohol, and then supplementing it with maybe 1 or 2 urine tests to get kind of a true sense of what the pattern of use may or may not be. So that's would be my goal, to find that. I'm sympathetic to a point about the cost, but again, I need to protect the public.
Absolutely.
So if I can do it through a combination of available new testing technologies without increasing the cost to the probationer and perhaps reducing it, not only in cost, but the impact to their day, I would be on board with that.
Right, that's what I'm thinking
Yeah,
about. Thank you.
Yeah.
And would the test be able to detect other things other than alcohol, or right now it's just alcohol for the blood?
Right now on the path, it's just the alcohol.
Okay.
But that's where you could mix in the urine
Yeah.
test, where it tests everything.
Because the nice thing is, if they could get away from urine tests, it's just the humiliating piece around
Yeah.
urinating in front of somebody. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's kind of one of my points when we talk to people, when I go out and do outreach. I mean, it's not private.
No.
It is not private. Your information is up on the web, and then if you have to test and give a urine sample, no privacy there either.
Yeah.
None. So some of that, I think that resonated with some of the Fresno State students. But, so I will keep you posted. I mean, the recommendation needs to be submitted by January 1st. And as we move through the process, I will update you. But I hope you took the time to look at the history of this, because it's, Stephanie did a really fabulous job of putting this together.
So just a very small clarification.
Mm-hmm.
So you said the urine test is not private?
No,
Oh, my
you pee in
goodness.
front of someone.
So that's just like the probation
Oh,
office?
yeah.
That's what they've done?
Yeah,
I didn't know
because,
that. Oh, my
well,
goodness.
because there are a few people that would like to, thank you, that's nice.
It's
I'm-
cheap, yeah, oh, yeah.
They'll cheat, yeah, or they'll submit somebody else's urine, or maybe, yeah, I mean, that's why it's observed.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I know, kind of funny, not funny, but, so.
Okay, the next two are also going to be presented by Kim, and it's an update on the exempt committee and the license portability committee.
So the last exempt committee meeting was on February 23rd, and the committee discussed a couple of different topics. The practice settings for the students. We looked at the results from the exempt private setting surveys. We talked about temporary agencies and employment through that. And then we looked at unlicensed masters of social works billing as psychotherapists. There was a few directions, to staff for the next meeting, which will be June 8th. And just to confirm, that's going to be at 8:30 in the morning, right? Okay. We continue the work, and I will, the surveys gave us some really good information, and the stakeholders continue to participate, and it continues to be a work in progress. Are there any questions? Okay. The License Portability Committee, this one's near and dear to my heart. I really like this one. So we had a meeting again in February, and during this particular meeting, we presented some framework for change using the LPCC statutes. Essentially, and we presented that sort of as, that was an easy place to start, and with the idea that we would use some of the proposed changes for the other two professions. And so what we had sort of boils down to is that the framework's going to include that licensee that applies to us, it has to have a current active unrestricted license for at least 2 of the past 5 years. The qualifying degree is either a master's or a doctoral degree that came from an accredited or approved school. The applicant will submit some fingerprints. The applicant will take and pass a board law and ethics exam. We're going to ask the applicant to complete a 12-hour law and ethics exam and a 15-hour coursework in California cultures. And then completion of all that, as I understand, if I recall correctly, once they check all those boxes, they're in. They're done. So that means that we will accept their exam score from the clinical exam from MBCC. It means that the LPCC no longer needs to dig through their archive boxes for supervised work hours. We're giving them credit that we're essentially establishing a framework where that out-of-state licensed applicant is going to be treated as a licensee applicant and not a brand-new applicant. So I think that's going to go a long way to improve portability in the state. And I think that that same idea is going to be applied to the other professions as well. So, I mean, there's some I mean, gosh, Renee, could I ask you to go give me your supervised hours? I mean, I don't even know that you would even have them.
Yeah, the supervisors are long dead.
Right, right. But you've been practicing for 20 years, so, but I need to see that you made supervised hours, right? Yeah. So that's kind of, that's just a different lens that we're using for that. So the committee said, it made some modification suggestions to us, and we'll be presenting those modifications at the next meeting on June 8th, as well as, I think, LCSW and LMFT proposals. So, any questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
So one, thank you for the fantastic work on this. I know, like, it is on.
Yeah, his green light's glowing.
It's glowing. So thank you for the work, for the committee's work on this activity. My question is, related to the first, the license has to be current, active, and unrestricted for 2 of the last 5 years. Was there any thought to separating someone who may have had a restricted license and having a different sort of criteria for that? And I guess what I'm thinking is, if we have someone coming from out of state who has had sort of some sort of action against their license, that we have a different criteria than just 2 of the last 5. Because my concern would be, let's say you were, in the last 5 years, you had 3 years, you were under restriction or probation, then just the last 2, you were off in practice, and I think we'd want to know and be concerned more about, you know, what are the specifics around what happened as it relates to coming into the state. So I don't know if there's, so my question is there any thought about separating out the restricted piece and having its own criteria that is also necessary?
I know that we talked a little bit about that, and I think if you view it from the perspective of how we would handle our licensees. You have a licensee that goes on to probation or has a citation. Let's just use probation because that's really the one we're worried about. They are given a set of terms and conditions to complete. Once they're all successfully completed, the restriction is removed.
Sure.
While they're restricted with us on probation, they cannot supervise, period.
Right.
So I think the thought is that if they've completed 3 years probation successfully, have gone on to practice for 2 years, no other incidents, then I think from my perspective, I would not be so inclined to discount them coming in. Because there's some value. If they've successfully completed, they've obviously had some remediation and have continued to practice unrestricted without any other incidents. And in my mind, I think that they have done their due diligence, yeah. And this 2 out of the last 5 years seems to be consistent with the other professions I'm working with, so social workers and clinical counselors across the country.
Okay. So just have a quick follow-up question. So then what if it's in the reverse? What if in the last 5 years, the first 2, they were clean free, and then the last 3, they were on probation?
They would not come in.
That wouldn't.
They would be denied, and then they could go through the hearing process.
And is that, or, I mean, would that be sort of clarified in the process? Because I could see someone appealing that and saying, well, yeah, I was on probation the last 3, but the first 2 of that 5, I was fine.
No, I think, yeah, because you're not having an unrestricted license coming in. If you're still on probation, even if I was to give you that license, you're still on probation with another state. And typically what we do is we sort of mirror those conditions. And in our state, if you're on probation, you can't supervise.
Sure.
So,
But I think in the example that I shared, if
Right.
for the first 2 years of that 5, they were
fine.
unrestricted, they would. And then
Right.
the last 3, they were on probation, and then a month ago they got off, they would have the 2 years.
right.
And would that be any concern for us as a
I,
board?
I think that it would be a concern if you're on probation and you applied for a license in our state.
Okay, but I
So
said
that, but we need to specify
I
that.
said something a little different.
Yeah.
So here's what I said. The last 5 years, the first 2 of those 5, they had an unrestricted license.
So they qualify.
The last 3, they were on probation, and they got off probation a month ago. Would the board have any concern about them recently getting off of probation 1 month ago? That's the question that I have.
So it looks like, you know what, I typed that up for you, so I
Yeah.
apologize. And we didn't really include, one of the changes that I think we did discuss, and I hope this is correct. It looks like the language that we'll probably be talking about in June 8th The applicant licensed in another jurisdiction has been current, active, and unrestricted in that jurisdiction for at least 2 years immediately prior to the date of the application received by the board.
So that takes care of that.
So that's what, that was the.
Yeah, that was
that's
the
what- I think we
change.
did have that conversation. I
I knew
believe
we
that's
did.
what we came
Yeah.
about.
Yeah,
So,
I think so,
We-
yeah.
That's
So
great.
that
That's an
was,
important clarifying
yes,
fact.
no, I agree.
We did make some tweaks, like, I don't have it in front of me right now, so I
I
don't
remember.
remember exactly what it says now, but so, yeah. If you looked at the actual language, then yeah, then we made some tweaks to it.
Thank you, Steve, that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you. So that's where we are with, and this, framework, a little more clarified, was what I'll be talking about at the conference in Canada, so.
Okay, moving on, I have a request. We're going to move number 31, which is on the backside of your agenda, Assembly Bill 1436, to the front. So we're going to address that one first. And then also, while you're on the backside, the last two bills, Senate Bill 1298 and Senate Bill 1480, we are not going to be discussing those, so remove those from your agenda, please. Okay. We're moving.
Not in here. Yeah, they're on the agenda, but they're not in the packet.
Oh.
Yeah.
The last two bills, Senate Bill 1298, Skinner, and 1480, Hill, have been removed for discussion.
And I don't believe they were included in the packet. Yeah,
Okay.
they're on the
Okay.
agenda, but,
Hence why I guess we're removing them.
So the people coming to discuss 1436 are going to be here at about 11.
so we're not, yeah, so that's 31. So do you want to do the first couple of items under
Oh,
P
and
and
the
A
people
reco?
that want to discuss it are not here yet?
Not quite.
Not all of them, no.
Oh, okay. All right, so what we will do is item number 31 will be heard when the representatives are here that would like to be heard. And before that time, we will start at the top and we'll start moving on down. Could someone please alert me when they come? So, okay, thank you very much. And then we'll be able to slide you in. Okay, Roseanne.
All right, so AB 456, everybody should have received an amended version of this yesterday. You should be looking at the analysis that says amended May 7th, 2018. So if you don't have that, please let me know. There are some extra copies for those in the audience that might want it out on the table if you didn't grab those on the way in.
Okay, what are we doing? I'm sorry.
This is.
Oh, we're gonna get it?
You have it, you have it. Yeah. AB 456, yes. Yes. Uh-huh. I know. It's been in place for at least 84.
Are the changes that significant, or do you want to just
Yeah.
walk them through? Oh, yeah. All righty. Why don't you start walking them through it?
Okay.
Yeah.
And so this bill extends the 90-day rule for applicants for registration as an ASW. Currently, that only applies to applicants for registration as an associate marriage and family therapist or an associate professional clinical counselor. And so basically what the 90-day rule says, just to summarize, is if they apply for their associate registration within 90 days of the granting of the qualifying degree, that they would be able to count those experience hours gained while they're waiting for their registration to be issued. They would also, under this proposal, need to submit proof that their work site required live scan fingerprinting prior to them gaining any hours. And the law for current associates that are applying under the 90-day rule, as well as the proposal for ASWs, would prohibit an applicant from being employed or volunteering in a private practice until registered as an associate. And so LCS law, as I just said, does not currently contain the 90-day rule. And the sponsor of this bill, which is two agencies, one's called Seneca Family of Agencies and Lincoln Families, they are running this bill because they feel that the delay between graduation and receipt of a registration number creates a hiring barrier for ASW applicants. It creates unnecessary inequity for them because they cannot use the 90-day rule, and MFT and PCC associates can. And therefore, there's a little bit more of an incentive to hire those types of associates because they cannot, they can start working right away. There's some legislation that I need to mention because it goes really hand in hand with this particular bill. The board is currently sponsoring AB 93, which is our supervision bill. It's changing some requirements and strengthening the supervision requirements. AB 93 affects a lot of the code sections that contain the 90-day rule. And so this bill and AB 93 both became two-year bills last year due to public protection concerns that were raised in the Senate. The Senate had concerns that the 90-day rule allowed unregistered individuals to provide services without a fingerprint clearance. So over this past summer, we engaged in some extensive discussion and collaboration with the board, our stakeholders, the sponsors of this bill, and also the Senate Business and Professions Committee. And we were able to reach a compromise that satisfied the Senate's concerns and would allow the bills to move forward. The 90-day rule could remain in LMFT and LPCC law if the applicant's workplace requires live scan fingerprints prior to the gaining of supervised experience, and the applicant can provide the board with the proof of that fingerprinting. And so this bill was also amended to contain those same provisions for the 90-day rule for LCSWs. In terms of this bill and AB 93, AB 93 is making significant amendments to the sections that are contained in this bill, and therefore I didn't want to bring you this bill without having it double joined with AB 93. What that means is that basically if AB 93 were passed, if we didn't have that language written in to link it with AB 93, one bill would overwrite the other. And it's going to look, this bill will look significantly different after AB 93 gets done with those sections. So this new version that you have, that you got yesterday, that version shows what the bill would look like in two different scenarios. One is if AB 93 were to pass, and one is if AB 93 were not to pass. So you have the full, what the language would look like, so you can take a position on it. Typically, that's something that the legislature does in July or August, but because we requested it, they were able to get it done early this year. The board has indicated support of this bill in past meetings. At its May 2017 meeting, the board took a support position on the bill. And then at our Policy and Advocacy Committee last month, the committee recommended that the board consider a support position on this bill.
Are there any questions?
Just clarification, I don't think there's enough caffeine sometimes that I can follow this. So this one is, there's two versions. If AB 93 passes, the language will be one way. If it doesn't, it's another way. And this basically is saying if they've already been fingerprinted and meet these three criteria, then they're good to go.
Exactly.
Okay. And policy and advocacy, read details, we're all good with that? All right, I'm happy.
Let me know when you want a motion.
I would like to have an
In that case,
I'll
I'm,
make a
Okay,
motion.
I'll get a motion in a second and then public comment. Okay, is there a motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to support, to lend our support.
I'll second
Okay.
that.
Okay. Any public discussion? Would anyone from the public like to comment?
Basically, the support is what I'm here for. So good morning, my name is Cherie Dector. I'm with Seneca Family of Agencies. I'm a program director in our placement program for adoption and foster care. Seneca itself is a provider. I'm reading because I'm nervous. Seneca itself is a provider of mental health and child welfare and education services across 18 counties in California, and we serve over 18,000 youth and families annually. We employ close to 500 master's level staff of healing arts professionals across all of our programs. And we've worked closely with stakeholders over this 90-day rule, amendments to AB 456 and AB 93 over the past year, and we're extremely pleased with the outcome. I myself, as a supervisor in the program and have been in LCSW for close to 20 years, have always felt that parity has been a barrier for us hiring really qualified ASWs, and in adoption and foster care, that is a requirement. So I'm really happy to see that in front of the board, and that the board is supporting that. We conduct rigorous background checks and checks all staff, and so I feel like that is pretty much what happens in the larger agencies, and I'm hoping that you will continue to support this bill.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Okay. Oh, okay.
Rebecca Gonzalez, National Association of Social Workers, California chapter, also in support of this bill.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Any further we do have another one.
Taking a drink of coffee and some of that caffeine. GV Ayers with the California Association for Licensed Professional Clinical Counselors. We are in support of the bill. We believe that it deals with, brings some equity as far as how licensed professionals are dealt with this board. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, any further comments by the board? Questions, discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. I think we're ready for the vote.
Renee Launer? Yes. Dr. Christine Whitlisbach?
Yes.
Dr. Peter Chu?
Aye.
Betty Conley?
Yes.
Deborah Brown?
Aye.
Christina Wong?
Yes.
Dr. Leah Brew?
Yes.
Jonathan Maddox?
Yes.
Max Disposti?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. All right, Roseanne?
Okay, AB 767 is our next item of business, and this bill, it creates a master business license system under the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, otherwise known as GoBiz. It would allow a person who needs to apply for more than one business license with the state to submit a single master application through GoBiz, which would then be distributed to all of the relevant licensing entities. So currently, GoBiz has a permit assistance program under them that provides permit and regulatory assistance to businesses. And they have a nice website that if you're in a certain profession, you can type that profession in and find out the various state requirements for licenses and permits. And it gives you contact information for those agencies. So this bill, the purpose is to sort of take that one step further and create a business license center that would provide licensing information and requirements, and then a way to apply with one submittal. This bill would state that the director of GoBiz shall encourage state regulatory agencies to participate, and they would their office would adopt and update a schedule for the integration of various programs into the system. And it would require each state regulatory agency to cooperate and provide reasonable assistance to GoBiz. However, the state agency may deny or limit the ability of GoBiz to establish an application to obtain multiple licenses from that agency if they want to. And it does allow the state agencies to borrow money from the general fund in order to support the reasonable integration into the system. The author's office states that the most common form of business in California is a sole proprietorship. They note that these businesses face a lot of regulatory hurdles, and it can be confusing to know what is required. That's the reason for their existing system, which I already had mentioned, where you can enter a profession and it'll tell you the different permits. And so that could potentially be very helpful to someone who needed to have a wide variety of permits. However, in terms of this board's applicants, a lot of the board's license types go to their school programs specifically to obtain a master's degree toward licensure with the board. The educational institution helps prepare the students toward licensure, and then by the end of their respective graduate programs, they're very aware that the Board of Behavioral Sciences is their licensing entity. And not only that, obtaining a license with the board is typically a process. You have to become a registrant and gain experience hours, then apply to the board for exam eligibility for a couple of different exams, and then obtain a license once the exams are passed. So having an entity that's not familiar with those details and the complexity of the licensing process and when it changes frequently could add an unnecessary level of complexity to the license project for this board's particular type of applicants. In addition, the board, as Steve talked a little bit or two earlier, the board does not currently accept online applications, although that is something that we are working toward for some of our processes. The fiscal impact for DCA on boards and bureaus has not been calculated specifically at this time. The analysis for the Assembly Committee on Appropriations estimated that DCA suggested a one-time IT cost of $18.7 million and $240,000 annually to integrate all of the 113 license types under DCA. That's if they all opted in. But then a recent amendment implies that a state agency may opt out if they want to. And so at the Policy and Advocacy, one of their suggestion was take a support if amended position, but ask that the board's license types not be included. So I had a further conversation with the author's office on that area, and they reiterated that the recent amendment allowing boards or agencies to opt out makes participation optional. Their intent is to have the database developed on an annual schedule over time. It's going to be done specifically by GoBiz, and they're a somewhat small agency. The highest priority are sort of small businesses where an individual needs a high number of permits. And the example that they gave were people that might, as part of their job, they might be an independent contractor in pest control or something like that, and they handle a lot of toxic substances or things that need licenses or permits. So it might be very helpful to them. They also used, as a DCA example, Barber Cosmetology Board as somebody that some of those licensees may need certain other certificates to dispose or work with certain chemicals. So those are kind of the highest priority type individuals. It doesn't seem to be aimed specifically at board licensees in this case. So with that, I'll turn it over for discussion.
Okay, does anyone have any questions? Christina?
So I want to thank the staff, Roseanne, to talk to the author's office and, and find out that we have that capacity to opt out, of the GoBiz program. And secondly is so if we choose to opt out, then, we're not going to be, burdened with that IT cost, right?
I spoke to DCA to find out about that, and they indicated at this time it does not look like that. No, it would be, if a board decided to opt in, they would be responsible for the costs. And so if a lot of boards decided not to opt in, those boards, it would become a little bit more difficult for them. This is what they're thinking right now. I mean, this changes, the bill changes, or if the bill changes, but the less boards participate, the higher the initial costs, but it does not sound like they're looking at doing an overall pro rata cost for everybody. And if you decided to opt out at one point, it does not mean that you could not opt in at some point in the future.
Renee?
So I'm wondering, is it that we have to opt out because we've been automatically put in, or you opt in if you want?
I think you would, well, they weren't
specific
on that. It sounds like that we're kind of low down on their list of priorities. They really want to get certain state agencies that require a lot of licenses and permits, which our license types don't have that, but some, especially those that deal with chemicals or other types of settings might. So and GoBiz is a pretty small entity, so I think it's probably years away from when they would even get around to this board.
So the reason I was asking is if it's an opt-in, then we could just take no position, right? It's not going to affect us.
You definitely can take no position if you want. It's not something that's going to be the way that this is written right now, it's not going to be, they're not going to come knocking on our door in January.
Good. Thank you.
Good questions.
Is
Any-
there then a advantage or disadvantage of support and then have board staff work with them to make sure that we're not part of it since it's not perfectly clear, or just to not take a position? Because politically it seems like supporting would be
The right thing to
the
do.
right thing to do.
Yeah. In the current version that we have, because we have the opt-out, I would be in favor of suggesting a support position, because then that allows us to continue to communicate and monitor any kind of odd changes that may happen with gut and amend at the end of the year. So, yeah.
So the motion would be something like to move to support with the assumption that we don't want to be part of it, and to have board staff continue to work with them to make those changes.
Right, well, and because they made the change of opt-out now
Yes.
in the language, then they've essentially done what we talked about doing at the P&A committee. So now it has been amended, so now
It's just a support.
it's just a support.
And then
And we would-
staff can make
And-
non-substantive changes.
We would continue to monitor, and if for some reason it was changed, then we would need to bring it back.
Right.
I'm happy to make that motion.
Okay.
I'll second that.
There's a motion by Leah Brew and a second by Christina Wong. At this time, is there any other questions by the board members? I'd like to open it up to the public. Is there anyone from the public that would like to address? I can't see with this podium, so I'm too short.
It is
Okay.
ostentatious. It is ostentatious.
Okay. All right, seeing none, I guess we're ready to call for the vote.
Renee Launer,
Yes.
Dr. Christine Whitliswalk,
Yes.
Dr. Peter Chu,
Aye.
Betty Conley,
Yes.
Deborah Brown,
Yes.
Christina Wong,
Yes.
Dr. Leah Brew,
Yes.
Jonathan Maddox,
Yes.
Max Distos.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, Roseanne, we want to move, he's got one more person to wait for. Assembly Bill 1779. What? No, he said they're waiting for one more.
One more.
I'm keeping tabs on it. 1779, Roseanne?
AB 1779 died, so we're not going to be discussing that today.
Oh, all right, next. All right, Assembly Bill 2088.
Okay, so 2088 is a bill that's sponsored by CAMPS, and it has to do with addendums to patient records. So what this bill would do is include minors in the allowance that any patient that inspects his or her patient records may provide a written addendum to the record for any item or statement that they believe is incorrect or incomplete. Currently, this provision is allowed only for adult patients. However, the law except under certain circumstances, allows adult or minor patients to inspect their health care records. And if an adult patient who inspects his or her records has any concerns with what's in those records, they can provide a written addendum of up to 250 words to address the issue that they believe is incorrect. And the healthcare provider must then attach this to the patient's records. There are certain circumstances, even for an adult or a child, when a healthcare provider may decline to permit inspection if they determine that there is a substantial risk of significant adverse or detrimental consequences to the patient. And in that case, there's a separate process for a third party to take a look if that happens. So under this bill, anybody, an adult or a minor, would be allowed to provide a written addendum. The author states that the right to addend a treatment record is critical given that these records may be subject to disclosure and have potential impact to patients' lives and their ability to pursue various endeavors. They point out that minors 12 or older can consent to their own treatment and inspect their records, so that they should have the right to addend their treatment records as well. At its April meeting, the board's Policy and Advocacy Committee recommended a support position on this bill.
Okay, any questions by board members to Roseanne? Dr. Chu?
So this is only related to counseling records and not the medical treatment records?
it's related to any medical treatment records,
Okay,
not
okay.
just
I
counseling.
just want to make sure. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Roseanne? I'd like to open it up to the public. Does anyone from the public have a comment about this bill?
Kathy Atkins from CAFT. Truthfully, Roseanne said everything I could possibly say, so thank you for summarizing it so beautifully. So we would just ask that the board consider supporting the bill and take the recommendation of the Policy and Advocacy Committee. And thank you to Roseanne. I couldn't have done a better job, so thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Ben Caldwell, AMFT California. We're in support of the bill.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
GV Ayers with CalPIC. We're in support of the bill.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Can I make a motion?
You may.
I move to support.
I will
Okay.
second it. Peter can have it.
Okay, so there's a motion by Christine, and there's a second by Peter. Any further discussion? Okay, I think we're ready for the vote.
Renee Lonner?
Yes.
Dr. Christine Whitlock?
Yes.
Dr. Peter Chu?
Aye.
Betty Conley?
Yes.
Deborah Brown?
Aye.
Christina Wong?
Yes.
Dr. Leah Brew?
Yes.
Jonathan Maddox?
Yes.
Max Bosowski?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We are now going to go to item 31, Assembly Bill 1436. And so we're going to first get an overview by Roseanne, and then I will open it up to the board for questions and then to the public.
Okay, so everybody should have gotten as part of their supplemental material a letter from Mr. Victor Ojakian. So you should have that on the table in front of you or received it yesterday. And so this bill would require beginning January 1st, 2021, any licensee with the board to demonstrate completion of at least 6 hours of coursework or supervised experience in suicide risk assessment and intervention. Current licensees would be required to demonstrate completion of this coursework or supervised experience in their first renewal period after January 2021. Currently, licensees of the Board of Behavioral Sciences must, upon renewal of their license every 2 years, certify completion of at least 36 hours of approved continuing education related to their field of practice. Also, current law requires all board applicants to complete specified coursework in certain topic areas. Those include a variety of things, including child abuse, elder-dependent adult abuse, alcohol and substance dependency are some of the examples of required one-time courses. So this bill would require the suicide coursework, 6 hours of it, beginning January 1, 2021. And so it can be gained by one of the following 3 methods. Number 1, it can be obtained as part of the qualifying degree, and a new applicant would need to provide the board with written certification or other from the registrar or training director saying that the coursework was included. Or it can be obtained as part of the applicant's applied experience via practicum or internship, formal doctoral placement, or other qualifying professional experience. A written certification must be submitted to the board from the director of training or from their supervisor that they had the experience. Or third, it can also be obtained via a continuing education course from a provider designated as acceptable by the board. The applicant must submit a certificate of course completion. So that's for new applicants. For an existing applicant, after January 1, 2021, when they go to renew, they would need to sign on their application, their renewal form that they would need to sign under penalty of perjury on their renewal form that they had completed at least 6 hours of training and coursework via one of the three methods I listed above. And they would need to retain proof. They wouldn't need to submit it, but they need to retain the proof of completion of that material in case the board requested it. And so the author states that the purpose of this bill is to establish a baseline coursework requirement for all of the board's licensees for suicide assessment and intervention training. Several organizations, including the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Institute of Medicine, have indicated a need for improved education and training in suicide assessments. This is kind of been a long process or a long road to this bill coming. A similar bill was introduced during the 2013-2014 legislative session, and that was via AB 2198. And that would have required licensees, current licensees to complete 6 hours of training or coursework, and new applicants to complete 15 hours in the topic. The board at the time considered the bill, and they shared the author's concerns that some professionals may lack this training, but they did not believe at the time that the bill as written would accomplish its objective. At the May 2014 meeting, the board took an opposed unless amended position on AB 2198 and asked that it be amended to instead form a task force to include members of the board and other stakeholders to talk about best practices. But the bill was not amended at that time. The governor subsequently vetoed AB 2198, and at that time he asked licensing boards to evaluate the issues that the bill raised and take any needed actions. In response to that, the board designed a survey in spring of 2015 for schools, and the survey was targeted at schools offering a degree program designed to lead to board licensure. A total of 28 master's degree programs responded to the 2015 survey, and the survey found that schools commonly integrate the topic of suicide assessment across a variety of sources, including in practicum. In addition, several schools reported offering additional elective coursework for students wanting further specialization in the area. Because of these findings at the time, the board concluded that mandating a specific number of hours was unlikely to be effective, and it offered some alternative solutions, including ensuring that certain frontline health professionals, such as nurses and physicians assistants, have adequate training in the topic, forming a task force to discuss model curriculum, assessing resources at the county mental health level, and increasing public awareness through media campaigns. And so since that time, the board has taken steps to support these recommendations. Last year, the board took a support position on AB 1372, which had to do with ensuring that services were available at the county level in crisis situations. That bill is currently a 2-year bill. And then today, the board is also going to consider taking a position on SB 968, which would require certain higher education agencies to hire a certain level of licensed mental health professionals. In terms of what the Board of Psychology did after the veto of AB 2198, they also did a survey, 2 surveys actually, and they found that the majority of their survey respondents provided some education and training on the topic. However, the amount of education and training for them varied. About 3% of their students were not receiving training in the risk assessment, and over 7% were not receiving training in suicide interventions. And so due to these findings, the Board of Psychology last year sponsored AB 89, which was signed by the governor. It pretty much mirrors the language that you're seeing here today, but it was for psychology licensees only. And so their bill will become effective. It'll become a requirement January 1, 2020. The board in late 2017 conducted a second survey, this board did, and we did it via SurveyMonkey instead of mail this time in hopes of getting more responses. It went to all degree programs that were intended to lead to licensure with the board. The 2017 survey sought to answer 3 primary questions. How many total clock hours does your school's program have on the topic? Is the coursework contained in one course, or is it integrated across several courses? And which courses is the topic contained in? Where is it in your program? We got a little bit of better response this time. We got 44 school programs responding. And attachment A summarizes the results of the 2017 survey. In terms of the clock hours of the coursework, no responding school programs reported less than 2 hours of coursework coverage. 8 school programs, about 18%, had indicated 3 to 5 hours of coverage. 50% reported having 6 to 10 hours, 18% 11 to 20 hours of coverage, and 14% reported more than 20 hours of coverage. In terms of the location of the coursework, about 20% of the programs indicated that it's contained in one course, and about 80% said it's integrated throughout their program. And then in terms of required courses covering the topic, it varied widely, so it was a little bit difficult to identify too much of any trends there, but some commonly mentioned courseworks were law and ethics, practicum, crisis and trauma, assessment, and substance abuse. In terms of the fiscal impact, it would likely be absorbable within existing resources. The evaluators would need to look to make sure the courses were completed. We need to do some minor briefs, changes, and updates to application. The main thing that the board would need to do is to conduct outreach in 2019 and 2020 to ensure that all licensees and future applicants are aware of this requirement, so they're ready for it and they have the backup materials to show that they've completed the coursework by the time that they either apply or renew in 2021. There are a few suggested minor technical amendments that I have asked the author to consider, and they seem like they're receptive to the technical amendments. The reference to supervised professional experience, that's a board of psychology term, and so we would like the term to be supervised experience to be consistent with how it's used in our statute and regulations. Formal doctoral placement is another term used in the bill. It refers to formal doctoral placement as we require in our law. We don't have that, and then so that would need to be changed to reference probably Board of Psychology's placement requirements. And then just some minor language modifications to describe the three methods that are required. The Board Policy and Advocacy Committee discussed this bill in April. However, it was not in print yet, so the committee was unable to recommend an official position. So now we have amendments to the bill, and so a position can be taken.
Okay, and discussion by the board? Yes, Leah?
I have several things. So one of the things that's always been mystifying to me when we add continuing education areas is what appears to be a randomness of the number of hours. And I'm just curious how 7 hours came to be. Is that because child abuse is 7 and HIV, so it looked really good? I mean, I'm just thinking in terms of a semester, that'd be 2 classes plus 1 class. I mean, 1 hour in another class. It's just, this one's 6, this one's 6. Okay, why am I thinking 7? Okay, so, all right, so we're just being consistent with the other.
Well, this is their proposal. So, and to answer your initial question, I have no idea how they came up with the numbers for child abuse and sexual, abuse reporting, HIV, any of that. But the proposal has been pretty consistent with 6 hours.
Okay.
Even from a few bills ago, it's always been 6.
Okay.
So, and there must be some reason for it, but maybe the authors can speak to that.
The second question I have is, and I wrote in big red letters, the way that if we decide to approve this, the way that we're asking the registrants to certify, excuse me, seems like it could be really more streamlined. If the board could change the program certification to include that, so that, and then also when the application that the individual does, that when they self-certify of the different sections, that they sign that. I mean, it's interesting because if you were to ask my students, they call me and they say like, did I have child abuse? And I say, when do you make a report? When it's reasonable suspicion, I'm like, you had child abuse. You know what I mean? So,
I know.
So anyway, it would just be helpful if we had it on those forms rather than us having to construct a letter as educators that goes out to every single student in addition to the program certs.
It's what you're talking about is exactly how I envisioned we would implement this. We would follow the same pattern and practice that we used for social workers when we had to have the schools identify where law and ethics was in their coursework. I know they're getting it, but it's nice to have them tell us. So revising the program cert to ID, where that is incorporated in the 6 hours within the degree program, I don't think it's going to be that much of an issue.
And the application.
any application. So.
Because you'd want to do that for in-state and out-of-state and all
right.
that stuff. So
Right.
if you
Yeah,
were
there'll
to,
be some form revisions.
so would it
definitely.
take like a year to get that done, or 6 months in terms of an effective date? I also have to say I'm dismayed to see that there are people not talking about this. I didn't even list all the courses. I was like, oh, this is enough when I did
Right.
mine.
Right.
I'm amazed that
Roseanne has a perplexed look.
Well, it says a written certification. I think we could probably come up with a written certification that they can use pretty easily.
That and/or if we incorporate it on the program cert that the schools
that we already
attest.
just add one more line.
Yeah, we can do, I think we can do both. It's,
Yeah.
I don't want this, if the board decides to support this and this becomes law, I don't want it to be really onerous on the applicants at all.
Right.
I really don't. I think there's a very efficient way of getting that information.
So then what would the time frame be that all of that paperwork could go into effect? And you would want, it'd be hard to let all the institutions know. I would say it would take a year to
At least.
inform. I mean, I really think probably 90% of the programs have it. So it's
My
just
guess is yes to that.
the 10% need to add it. But it's not a course, so it's not going to require a lot of labor to add the information.
My thought is, yeah, if the bill goes through and is signed, it'll become effective January 1.
Of this year, of 2019. But that doesn't give programs.
It's got a delay.
Does it have a delay?
Yes, it's January 1,
2020.
2021.
Okay.
So
Okay, that makes
it's
more
not
sense.
until
We've
2021.
got plenty of time
It's
then.
already built
Yes.
in.
Oh,
So
that's
it would-
perfect.
It would go into the actual text would go into the law on January 1st of 2019, but the bill itself has a delayed implementation. for 2
Oh,
more
excellent.
years.
Then we have what we need.
Okay, good. Good,
Yes.
thank you.
So would that also mean that students who complete their academic program before January 1st, 2020 do not have to provide any evidence of having taken this course? Am I understanding that correctly?
No, they will. They will have to, once they're a licensee, they will have to show in their first renewal that they have it.
Okay.
So they take a CEU.
Sure.
After.
So then my follow-up question would be, if a trainee takes a training, like either in their placement or through their system of care, like if someone's training in Santa Cruz County, they take a 6-hour training and they present a certificate of attendance that says they attended this training, it was 6 hours, that will qualify for them because they don't get CE certificates.
It would have to be, so the 3 acceptable options are, as part of his, one can be applied experience, so they would have to have something from their supervisor stating that either the director of training for the program or their primary supervisor, or, so if it was that kind of situation, then they would have to have their supervisor sign off.
But if a program or system of care decided, okay, we're going to designate the director of training as the person, they could present a certificate of attendance with the person's name, the actual course, and say this was a 6-hour training, and that would be appropriate for them.
The director of,
Sounds like-
it allows the director of training for the program to sign off that they had the experience.
And the reason why I'm asking is it's important for systems and programs to understand how they can support students. And
Right.
say, we've already provided this, so we want to help facilitate a smooth transition through the process.
It would have to be if it was part of their practicum or internship while they were a student.
Okay. So I think we're saying the same thing. I just want to make sure we are. So, for example, I'm the director of training for San Francisco County. I offer countywide trainings that students who train in our system are eligible to attend. And so if I were, as the director of training, to say, to support this process for students, I'm going to give you a certificate of attendance that says your name, the training, and that this was a 6-hour training, that would meet the criteria for them because we're trying to support them as they move toward getting their license.
I think so, because that would be part of their
as part of their
applied
education
Part of their
experience.
internship, as part of their
Internship,
traineeship.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
As an institution, so I'm thinking I would have 3 years of graduates who would be in that in-between state, right? It wouldn't be part of their program certification, or maybe more than that. Do I need to produce mass letters for each of them to show that it was in my, because here's another thing, I don't know, this would be more work for the board. Like either we need to do mass mailings to all of our alumni, or the board can say, oh, if you graduated from the Department of Counseling at Cal State Fullerton, then you're good.
Gosh, we're in the weeds.
Well, it was
But these
if we're
weeds
part
are
of the-
really important.
I
I
know
mean,
the
it's a
weeds are
labor
important.
for BBS or
Somebody.
the institutions, yeah.
If it were part of the program cert, then that should satisfy that it was done.
But these are the people who are just graduated in December, for example.
If they're one of the schools that we surveyed,
You're one of
and-
the,
and then
yeah.
we're good.
Well, but what about all the other schools? You know how you do your annual
I can see where we're
reports?
gonna need, yeah.
They
we're-
would have to provide some sort of a letter or certification.
So the institution needs to send it to the registrant.
Right.
Or we could send something to the board saying, here's how we meet it.
Yeah, maybe for the in-between, we could think about doing some kind of form that is available on the website they could download, that they could be part of their application packet. And certified, yeah.
Under whatever,
Under whatever course it would be.
Yeah, because it just seems remarkably labor intensive. And they'll call us, which that's quick, but if I have to produce 360 or 420
I know.
letters,
I think incorporating it somehow in the application packet might be the most efficient. And then, because at some point, somebody can sign off on it, and then that makes it easier. Because now you're only doing a signature, not a letter.
Here's a thought. I mean, I don't know if we want to get too far in the weeds. I mean, would it be appropriate to create the form under perjury, they sign it, or have a checkbox as a part of the actual application process? And then offer institutions the option to create their own document that says we certify as a program. This is the training, this is the actual class that meets this requirement, and this student actually has taken this class. And it could be general and actually address anyone in the program, and that sort of supports
Yeah.
minimizing the labor-intensive nature of what schools have to do.
I think we could probably work with staff back at the office and figure out the best way to make it so that if this was to go into effect, that there would be, everybody gets what they need without pulling their hair out, so to speak, because it's so much work. But yeah, we can figure that one out.
Christina, did you have a question? I just want to clarify. So this is applied to only the graduates. I mean and it also applied for the current licensees.
Yes, it's both, current licensees and new applicants.
And so the current licensees will need to, get the words out and knowing that this is one-time requirement to take a 6 units class.
Yes.
Okay.
6 hours.
Unless it's part of their program. Now, it comes into exactly my next question. So we are accepting 2 modes of the continuing education requirement. One is a certification from the school. The other is, to get a course that is, under our law, that is acceptable by the CE requirement, which means that, like Jonathan, he said, if I just said, certify a, print out a certificate, that may not work because it may not fall under, our legality, yes, of our CE requirements.
But Jonathan was talking about doing it for a student. So if it's a student, it's coming through the training program, the
part of the school
internship.
program.
It's part of the school program.
The bill
Right.
specifies it's part of the school.
I'm talking about the post one.
Post if they don't,
Has to be-
yeah, they would be on the, if I'm a licensee, host, and this a requirement comes into effect, I only need 6 hours, it's probably more efficient and respectful of my own time to jump online, grab a 6-hour course, or go to a 6-hour training course and check that box and call it good, as opposed to going back to my school where I graduated to determine if I had 6 hours in all my coursework. I think that's going to be more labor intensive. So that's what I see happening.
And it will count towards the 36 hours.
And it counts towards the 36, much like all the other ones did.
You have a follow-up question? Yes, I have a follow-up question. It's so, now, because the language now is that they're required to take, after the implementation, that, they have to take it within their first renewal period. And so I am wondering, how the words are going to get out, because sometimes, the implementation is very, very slow. And so is it going to be like they just, design on the briefs for the online renewal form that they just check the box, or do they? I'm just wondering, how do you, when you come into an audit, how do you, prove that this is,
You did it?
Yeah.
Betty?
No.
Oh, sorry. Well, I just wanted to say that Christina was saying there's 2 ways. There's actually 3 ways. Because the other is, and this would apply to Jonathan's case, I think, is that it's obtained via practicum, and it says right there that the applicant must submit to the board a written certification from the director of the training program, which would be exactly. So that's that, and then there's this continuing ed, CEUs, or part of the degree. So I mean, it seems like it's covering all of the possible ways that you could possibly get that training.
If you wanted to prove you had it, if you just don't want to take the time to go dig through your
Then
transcripts,
you
then
would
just go
take
do
the
it.
class.
Just take the class because you have to do 36 CEUs anyway.
That's right.
So if you do the 6 hours suicide prevention and training, and then you do your 6 hours law and ethics, you have a third of your CEUs done with just those 2 classes.
But I know a lot of people do that. But many people do their CEUs like, okay, I'm going to go become an EMDR therapist. And I'm going to get my 90 hours of training. And they still have to do their law and ethics. So it is cumbersome for people. So I know my students, because of their income level, will come to us because they'd rather pay for their one conference. Conferences aren't necessarily doing this. I mean, the state ones may. And then, I'm just going to be getting a lot of emails, more than I already do. It's going to be an administrative nightmare for us.
Okay. So if it is for you, then
It is for all the other CSUs. Okay, any other questions? Renee, did you have something?
No, just a comment that for those of us who have been licensed a while, I had tons of suicide prevention, tons. My first placement was a child guidance clinic, for heaven's sake. But there's no way to have some kind of supporting documents. So I'll be signing up like all my peers for that 6-unit class, even though I probably had dozens and dozens of hours.
Okay, any other comments or questions from the board?
So I think what I'm hearing is there's a lean to support this very easily in the going forward. But for the retrospective, we have a lot of details to work out, and it's going to be really, really difficult to do that.
Thank you for your comments.
What I'm also hearing is that, what Renee said is like, those who have already licensed, have been in the field for practice. We have tons of experience, and yet we have no way, to get certification, but we have to dedicate that particular 6 hours, because we need to fulfill that requirement. And the practice experience, kind of like there's no way to certify it. So
Same with law and ethics.
So to a certain extent, it's a hardship for the current licensees. Because of the knowledge that we've already possess and accumulate and practice and even training those who are getting their licensing. So I think I think we understand the issue of the suicide prevention and the need to remind the the need for continuing training for assessing suicide and stuff. But it also what the elephant in the room is that I think the current clinicians that also feel like that is that really necessary. So
I think I want to go back to what we talked about for the senior, however we define senior licensees. Could they sign under penalty of perjury that they had that as part of their education or work experience, that they have that knowledge that would be equivalent to 6 hours, and you can define what senior means: 2 years post licensure, 5 years post licensure. I don't know what that number is. And then, but for all the newbies, then I think that's less onerous because, I teach this stuff. You're doing it in your agencies, and it just, I feel resentment coming on. I want to do the right thing, and this is, it's a lot of work.
Can I say something?
Yes.
I think, obviously, not as a clinician, we have an incredible amount of people that also are not as engaged like many of us are in areas where you're, for instance, in a university environment. So we have a lot of providers actually, even though they are seniors, even though some of this was required in the past, the preps are not so connected. So that wave might be a little bit more, it makes me feel uncomfortable because then how do you actually establish
Well,
that?
the reality is if it's an online CE, you can just go take the test
Take
without
it.
ever looking at the course. So those same people who take shortcuts, you're not going to prevent them from taking shortcuts.
Right, that's always true, right?
I mean, there's just no way to audit 100%.
Right.
Renee?
But at the same time, going back and if we had us like the senior classification, going back for the staff to actually be able to research, and that would be incredible. I think.
Yeah.
I think that's why the audit. I mean, the 6-hour course. Yeah, it is burdensome. I imagine.
The 6-hour course that doesn't exist, by the way.
Well, actually, that's another big thing. But but I mean, the audit. The audit, I think, is the best way to go.
So, as I think my experience is that there's a wide variation in clinicians' capacity to assess and manage suicide. For example, people struggle with managing successfully assessing suicidal ideation, which is one thing that someone may hold and struggle with versus someone who's actually suicidal. So I would support the amendment as written because I think there needs to be some standardization around competencies and sort of criteria, not necessarily criteria, but competencies that a clinician should have and hold as they look at and understand how to actually assess, intervene, and manage this. Because like I said, I've seen the variations and some of them have been very, very good and they're very skilled at it, and others who have been licensed for several years are not comfortable and don't do a really good job at it. So I think for the side of consumer protection, it's really important for us to ensure that people are trained with some sort of structured standard. You know, we don't have to advance a protocol, but we should say these are the competencies that should be included in a training, and everyone should be exposed to them so that they are at least aware of what a competent assessment, intervention, and management process looks like.
I want to add to that if we do that, we need to have in that competency and understanding of PET teams and documenting how PET teams' jobs is to make sure that people don't get hospitalized. I can't tell you how many times the work of the PET teams have damaged the client. So yes, they talked them out of going into the hospital, but then my student has had to sit with that client for another 2 to 3 hours to debrief the damage that the PET team did. So I also, for the people who are interested in the suicide conversations, you got to get involved with the PET teams because I understand they're trying to save money for the state and taxpayers and hospitals, but they are not properly trained. They should not be doing that work. They're with the psychiatric emergency team. So you call a particular phone, like it's with the agency to agency is different. Some of them say call 911 and the police assess, which is also really weird. That my therapist is less trained than a police officer on suicidality, or you call the PET team and then you sit there and wait an hour for the PET team to show up, and then they do an hour interview with their job to talk you out of suicide or going to the hospital. So yeah, that's
what.
Yeah, those are the two ways in which most of our agencies handle things, and it's really abhorrent.
Betty?
I just want to support what Jonathan said, because I think whenever you impose a requirement that we feel is a benefit to the profession, I mean, it's just an unfortunate consequence that sometimes people who are incredibly capable or incredibly competent in that area, and the same is true with when we adopted the child abuse or the alcohol regulations, the downside is that some people who are extremely high-level practitioners have to sit through a 6-hour or 7-hour class that they may not need once, with the benefit of possibly reaching people who really need it. And I think that that's a small price to pay in the grand scheme of things. So that was just my comment.
Okay, Renee?
Yeah, I want to second that. I have to take 40 hours every 2 years, and so if these are 6 of them, yes, there's something I'm going to pick up in that class that I didn't know before, basically. So.
Any other discussion by board members? Okay, I'm going to open it up to the public.
was a lot. Thank you. Good morning, Chairwoman Brown and committee. Oh, how's that? Better? Okay. Anyhow, good morning. It's still morning. And committee members. And I'd also like to start by thanking Executive Officer Madsen for at very short notice getting this bill on the agenda. And I want to thank you. So my name's Gordon Dowdy. I'm a board member with the Greater San Francisco Bay Area chapter of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. I also serve on 2 of their national councils and the State Superintendent of Public Instruction Student Mental Health Policy Work Group, the Governor's Interagency Prevention Action Committee Suicide and Depression Group, Community Advisory Committee for the Depression Center at UCSF, and 3 county suicide prevention committees. So suicide in the United States is the 10th leading cause of death. It's been the 10th leading cause of death for over a decade, and the only top 10 cause of death that has increased every year. California accounts for a little over 9.5% of the nation's suicides, resulting in a suicide every 2 hours in the state, and almost 110,000 attempts a year. So we have a lot of numbers. So whatever we're currently doing, in my opinion, is not that we're not doing enough, but I think we just need to do more, take a different look at it. And I believe that Assembly Bill 1436 provides that opportunity. I'm not going to go into a lot of what Van had said, but I believe that it was last year when the survey was done, we took a look and there was, if I remember right from the advocacy committee meeting, that there was about 18% of the schools had less than 6 hours. And you asked, where did the 6 hours come from? That just came out in discussion with the Board of Psychology, and also the Suicide Prevention Resource Center offers a 6-hour, 6.5 CEU class as it is now. So that's part of where that 6 hours came from rather than 7 or something else. We originally came up with 6 with our first approach in 2014 for those that had been previously licensed, and a whole bunch more for those going through. And of course, we learned through that process that was pretty prohibitive. So what we're looking at is this one-time requirement, really. There's what we see is that we've provided options, for those that have not been licensed yet, and those that are going for relicensing, or there is that option of taking another class if they haven't had it. I heard a lot today about, yes, we've had it, but it's been quite a while ago. How do we certify that? There's nothing that I read in this bill, and correct me if I'm wrong, that says when you certify, right, what that requirement is. And that could be left up to the board to determine what that looks like. If someone says, I had this in 2004 is part of my graduate, is that acceptable? We're not saying what's acceptable and what's not. Okay, I think that's up to the board to determine. Going back to the Board of Psychology, what we looked at there is they came up with pretty similar results from their 2 surveys that they did, and also took a look at their licensing examinations, and felt that they had a similar gap. And their position was, as long as there's somewhat a significant gap, we're looking at 18% rather, that we need to come up with something, which resulted in Assembly Bill 89, which went through and was signed by the governor. We feel that this bill allows for flexibility in suicide risk assessment and intervention. both the knowledge and the skills that are required to minimize that and minimize the burden on students, professionals, and the institutions by having that flexibility. I think we need to take every step we can to curb the increasing number of suicides. This bill is just one of those steps. I encourage you to support AB 1436. And I also want to mention something that had popped up, which popped up in 2014 as well, is, well, what about the primary care physicians, right? What about the emergency room personnel? What about what's happening in our correctional service? So I'm pleased to say that the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention on a national level is working with those organizations to get training. You know, it's not going to work if we just do it in California. It'd be great for us, but it has to happen at a national level to get the attention. You know, we all know that our criminal justice system harbors the majority of those with mental health problems, and that's very unfortunate. So how well they address them, what do they look for? We need to address that. We also need to address the emergency room personnel, just not the physicians, but anybody who's admitting needs to be aware, okay, as well as the primary care physicians and their staff. You know, so we're working with some training for those areas. We're hoping by the end of the year that we're successful in bringing that out. I'd also like to just relate something I'm doing with Napa County as part of their Suicide Prevention Committee. We're taking a look at an assessment tool, and we're in the process right now of getting agreement between law enforcement, both city and county, school district, we already have their support, and behavioral health, and so we're hitting up the hospitals now to all start with the same assessment tool. So there's some commonality there, and so when one rates somebody, this is the, forget all the Columbia suicide, whatever that is. And that's not to say that, especially if you're in a mental health setting, that you're not going to do something, you know, a little more detailed than that. But trying to come up with some commonality. And I think that the more across the board that we have similar types of assessment tools and take a look at this, the better off we're going to be. You know, I still question, you know, how law enforcement gets trained, you know, when they 5150 somebody, you know. And so that's one of the things that we're also taking a look at. There was 2 Senate bills passed the year before last, SB 11 and SB 29, Senator Bell, that required additional training both by post when they go through the academy, as well as for those that are they're, what do they call them? They're, when an officer goes through with a supervisor with their training out in the field for that, but up to 6 months of that, that they have a higher level of training to impose upon the person. So there, you know, there are some movements. We've done a lot of, as we call gatekeeper trainings around. And I think some of my colleagues will mention what's happening in their locale. So I want to thank you for your time and attention and answer any questions you have, as well as ask for your support. Thank you.
Okay. We do have some questions from the board.
Yep.
Thank you for coming in and for the hard work that you're doing. Are you familiar with the pet teams?
With some of, depending on
So
which county.
are you guys taking action with them as well? Because it's huge with my students' agencies.
You know, right now, I can say in Solano County, I'm also on their suicide prevention committee, is we're working with that. So I think that's going to be one of those things where we have to go through working county behavioral health by county behavioral health to get that done.
I would suggest the highly populated ones should be started first because there's a lot of involved. There's not a student of mine who graduates without having at least one client before they have their 280 hours who has at risk for suicide. So,
Yeah, and I see more and more, more so down here where a lot of USC students are ending up in the school districts. You know, and so, I mean, that's great, but, you know, we shouldn't have a system that has to undo, right?
thanks.
Thank you. Before we move forward, okay, but before we move forward with more public comment, may the board just take a 5-minute break? They've got to get checked out real fast before noon, and we will be right back in 5 minutes. Okay, 10 minutes.
As soon as I